She will gently remind you to go to bed when you're staying up late. Even if you argue with her, she won't get mad at you. She'll even come over and cuddle with you, relieving your fatigue from staying up late. Our male lead Luxun is the same, but things don't always go as planned. Luxun is a professional gaming booster. He took on a big order. After staying up for 3 days and nights, Luxun died suddenly. When he opened his eyes again, he found himself in another world. When he saw his own face, Luxun was stunned. It was because of this face. It's his face when he created a gaming alternate account. At that time, because it was an alternate account, Luxun made his appearance as perfect as possible. But now this isn't the point. He doesn't want to time travel. He still has a cute little sister to take care of. Luxun desperately pinched his face, hoping this was just a dream. But I pinched my face until it swelled. There was no change at all. At that moment a figure flashed past Luxun's eyes. It was very at Luxun's level he could only see a blur. The figure seemed to be just passing by. It didn't seem to intend to stay. But after seeing Luxun's incredibly handsome face, the newcomer couldn't help but exclaim, "Auntie." Then she gracefully landed on a tree branch not far from Luxun. And this girl with big eyes looked Luxun up and down several times. He couldn't help but clench his small fist and speak his mind. This is truly the absolute best furnace. Luxun had originally been wary of the newcomer's identity, but upon hearing the girl call him a furnace, Luke suddenly became shy. Is this the kind of good luck one gets right after crossing into another world? In an instant, Luxun's mind began to wander. But the next moment, Luxun snapped back to reality. Because in this Tianxuan Realm, the level cap for dual classes is very low. For example, others can level up to 999, but he can only level up to 233. Luxun immediately rejected the idea of a 2-day weekend. No, we can't have colors, it must be green, healthy, and positive energy. But when he saw the cute girl's face, Luxun couldn't help but cough a few times. It wouldn't hurt to do it once in a while. At this moment, the cute girl standing in front of Luxun was also lost in thought. It turns out this girl was originally a rich heiress. Her parents, by a twist of fate, obtained a magical sword and cultivation techniques from a celestial being. However, news leaked and her family was tragically wiped out. She now carries a deep-seated hatred. Her top priority is to increase her strength and take revenge. The cultivation technique her parents obtained happened to be a dual cultivation secret manual. Finding a handsome guy to practice dual cultivation with wouldn't be a bad thing. Thinking of this, the girl jumped down from the tree branch and slowly walked towards Luxun. Luxun thought the girl was going to use force on him and shouted, "Don't come any closer." But when the girl reached Luxun, she stammered. This rich young lady had no idea how to kidnap someone. Luxun couldn't help but smile bitterly. I thought he was a king, but he turned out to be a bronze player. Purely. And this girl, seeing Luxun up close, immediately covered her nose, about to bleed. Even his wry smile is so handsome. Luxun also speechless. He watched dumbfounded as the girl's head, a string of one affection points kept popping up. He remembered back when he played games. It was so hard to raise in PC affection levels. He looked up at the sky and realized the truth. It really is all about looks, no matter where you are. And this gesture caught the girl's attention. That jaw in that side profile is just too handsome. Suddenly the girl's gaze sharpened. She thought to herself, this is bad. There's killing intent. That group of people is after us again. The girl quickly reacted and instantly appeared behind Luxun. Then Luxun felt himself being picked up in an instant. Luxun inhaled the faint fragrance of the girl's body. His heart was filled with mixed emotions. Wow, I encountered a strong girl. Not long after the girl left with Luxun, a group of fierce and menacing people arrived at their previous location. Meanwhile, the girl was quickly distancing herself with Luxun in her arms. Even though she was holding Luxun, it seemed as if there was no weight at all. She appeared to be in a hurry, scared of those chasing her. At this moment, Luxun opened his mouth, as if wanting to say something. As a result, the moment he opened his mouth, a violent gust of wind rushed into Luxun's mouth, causing him to immediately close his lips. Reflecting, Luxun noticed a giant sword on the girl's back, and its basic information appeared before his eyes. This giant sword is called the wedding dress sword, a yellow-grade weapon. In the Tianxuan Realm, equipment is ranked as follows. The colors correspond to gray, yellow, blue, purple, and orange. As for the information about this yellow sword, Luxun can't check it due to his low level. However, since this is a yellow sword, it means it is a magical artifact. In the early stages of the game, magical artifacts are definitely considered treasures. After a girl ran around in a frenzy, she successfully got lost in the small woods. But this was no challenge for the girl. She took out the bridal sword. Under Luxun's confused gaze, she threw it straight into the sky. Seeing this, Luxun immediately understood. After it landed, she would go in the direction the sword's tip pointed, right? But then something ridiculous happened. The girl actually followed the direction of the sword's hilt. I don't really care about this road anymore. Anyway, it's pretty comfortable being held by a soft girl. It's just a bit windy, and I don't have to travel on my own. It's like riding a beautiful steed. The sun sets behind the mountains. Even a cultivator girl starts to feel tired. She's a bit drained right now. She originally planned to casually toss Luxun aside, but as soon as she saw Luxun's face, her face turned red once again. She gently set Luxun. Then she sat down beside him. When Luxun asked why she wasn't running, she said she would rest for a bit first, and finally she had shaken off those people. But the girl was also curious about who Luxun was. He clearly had no true energy in his body, yet when faced with such a situation he wasn't the least bit flustered. So strange. Seeing the girl looking at him, Luxun introduced himself. Then he asked the girl what her name was. The girl had already come up with a fake name. She, a late-stage face value control freak, saw Luxun's face and immediately blurted out. The girl was instantly stunned. Damn it, she even thought of using the name Big New Attorney to fool, but still ended up revealing her real name. Luxun, on the other hand, was suspicious, because he hadn't encountered her in the main storyline of Tianxuan Realm. Heard that name before. Could it be some ultimate small-time extra? After all, at such a young age, he's already seizing cauldrons. Seizing cauldrons is one thing, but also carrying a big yellow sword. He's gathered all the elements of a doomed fate in one go. It's really not easy. However, the next moment, Luxun's stomach let out a rumbling sound. The two of them just stared at each other. But the girl reached into her bosom. She took out a milk-flavored cracker. She asked Luxun if he wanted to eat it. Luxun looked at the milk-flavored cracker in the girl's hand. He couldn't help but sigh at the girl's innocence. It seemed she wasn't some great demon after all. After Luxun took the milk-flavored cracker, as a result, the girl's stomach let out a growl. Luxun let out a soft chuckle. He then split the milk-flavored biscuit in half, then handed it to the girl. Luke's gesture turned into a heart in her eyes. Or rather, in her eyes, his face was already good enough to be a meal. But suddenly a noise came from the distant forest. The person chasing the girl has arrived. Seeing this, the girl didn't have time to think. She immediately shoved the biscuit into Luxun's mouth. Then she pushed Luxun down into the nearby bushes. Luxun, startled by the biscuit in his mouth, asked the girl if there was any water. Hearing this, the girl took out the gourd from her waist. At the same time, her face couldn't help but blush. It's because this gourd is for my own use. If Luxun were to drink directly from it, wouldn't that be like indirect kissing? Thinking about that, the girl's face turned even redder. She didn't even notice Luxun taking the gourd away. Thankfully, Luxun didn't mean to do that. He opened his mouth and tilted the gourd to drink. His feelings were rather complex. What is this feeling of slight disappointment? At this moment, the person chasing the girl arrived. The girl immediately made a silenced gesture toward Luxun. At this moment, a cold wind blew by. For the first time, Luxun's expression changed. It directly froze Luxun, making him shiver, but it also made him feel a sense of familiarity. At this moment, the leader of the people chasing the girl appeared. He pointed directly towards Luxun and the others, shouting, There. I won't mistake that woman's scent." Then they slowly approached Luxun and the others. Seeing no escape, the girl was about to fight back, but Luxun covered her mouth. He put a finger to his lips, signaling her to be quiet, and whispered, "Hold your breath. Don't breathe." Luxi had created countless small accounts. He was intimately familiar with the newbie village, so he knew exactly where that gust of yin wind had come from, and he also knew what would happen next. Then, a mass of thick purplish-black gas. They quickly gathered together. Then a purple transparent creature emerged. It didn't look scary at all. It even looked a bit silly. The ones chasing the girl were confused. They had no idea what this thing in front of them was, but it didn't matter. If it dared to stand in their way, it would be crushed. In the next moment, a flash of blood red passed by. Everyone was instantly pierced through by a tentacle. The girl widened her eyes in shock. Fear rose in her heart. What is this thing? A cold wind blew through. Everyone collapsed to the ground lifeless. She watched as the shadowy figure drifted away. The girl breathed a sigh of relief. However, the next second she was scared again, because Luxun seemed to be looking for trouble with it. Although this thing looks silly and clumsy, Luxun knows it's a good thing. As long as he uses the right method, even a 3-year-old child could kill it. This is a rare mobile experience pack. Looking at the frightened girl behind him, Luxun told her to hide and hold her breath. Now watch his performance. Would you want to travel through time with such a lovely little sister? She would gently remind you to go to bed when you stay up late. Even if you argue with her, she wouldn't get angry at you. She would even come over and cuddle with you, soothe your fatigue from staying up late. Unfortunately, the male lead, Luxun, didn't heed his sister's advice. He died of overwork from staying up late. When he opened his eyes again, he was already in a cultivation world. As a result, he was kidnapped by a beautiful girl right after his transmigration. She wanted to use him as a furnace tripod. She wanted to cultivate dual cultivation with him, all because his face was simply too handsome. As a result, this girl is really too timid. She was even scared into fainting by a little ghost. This silly little ghost is clearly so cute. Luxun couldn't help but laugh, but now it's his turn to take over. The first thing he needs to do is hold his breath. This silly little ghost is like this. As long as he doesn't breathe, you can even dance wildly in front of it without any problem. Then Luxun chuckled. He raised his hands. He extended his two slender middle fingers directly towards the silly little bags, big cute eyes he poke, because that's its essence. As long as you hit it, it will be injured. A deep enough stab can result in an instant kill. Immediately the system popped up a notification. Kill the mountain demon and gain 666 experience points. Luke is overjoyed. It really is just like in the game. Killing monsters levels you up. He then opened the character panel. The reason was simple. Leveling up also automatically levels up. Then he looked at the girl who had fainted. Although she's young, she's quite well developed. No, how can I take advantage of a delicate girl? A real man should bravely live off a woman. A cold, elegant, black silk woman is the true love of a real man. No, I really shouldn't think about it. Luxun immediately rubbed the girl to wake her up. She sensed some movement. The girl also woke up from her coma. In a daze, she asked where the ghost that Luxun dealt with was. Luxun smiled faintly and said it had already been taken care of. As soon as the girl heard this, she immediately jumped up. She looked at Luxun with admiration in her eyes. Seeing this Luxun's favorability with her sword, Luxun waved his hand signaling for her to follow. The girl was initially puzzled about where Luxun was going, but she glanced at the direction Luxun was heading. She understood he was going to loot. To put it nicely, he was going to collect equipment. Immediately the girl's eyes lit up with greed. She rushed towards the equipment scattered on the ground. Afterwards the two of them picked up a pile of unidentified knives. What surprised him was, he found a manual on finger techniques. It's called Eagle's Finger. Luxun glanced at it a few times. Then a system prompt appeared asking if he wanted to learn it. After Luxun clicked confirm, a message flooded into his mind. You have learned Eagle's Finger. But it's just the basics. Luxun quickly moved his finger a couple of times. It actually looked quite impressive. And all of this was seen by the girl. The girl's fondness for Luxun skyrocketed. Could she be thinking of other uses for this finger technique? She just felt that Luxun was a genius. As for Luxun, he felt a little scared. What if her fondness for him grew too quickly? By then that eagle emblem will be useless. It might even excite her more. Lux's gaze made Geely suspicious. She asked Luxun why he was looking at her with such a strange expression. Luxun awkwardly said it was nothing. Geely didn't press further. Instead she curiously asked Luxun, wasn't he surprised that she was being hunted? Luxun glanced at her and teased, is it 'cause you always pick people as your furnace? Geely was so angry when she heard that. Luxun was clearly just the first person she caught, okay? Enraged, Geely wanted to punch Luxun. But as soon as she saw Luxun's perfect looks, Geely gave up and decided to let it go. At this moment, Luxun told Geely to look ahead quickly. Excitedly, he said it was a town. As soon as Lu finished speaking, he was immediately pulled up by Geely, and they ran wildly toward the town. Without any awareness, he shouted, I told you my sense of direction has always been great. See, we were already at Kingmu County. But when they reached the town's entrance, Geely was instantly too embarrassed to speak. I wonder who got lost back then. Using the wedding dress sword to show the way, Luxun, however, saw the words Wei County and his eyes lit up. This is a newbie village. He's familiar with this place. After entering the town, Luxun gleaned quite a bit of information from people. He learned that it is currently the year 3997 in the Tianxuan calendar. He remembered that the game setting takes place in the year 4000. That means there are still 3 years until the Tianxuan Realm public beta. At this point, Geely shyly said, let's rest at the inn for a while. Actually, Geely just hadn't bathed in a while and wanted to take a shower. Luxun then led Geely through the familiar path to the inn. They arrived at an inn called Keep a Low Profile Innkeeper. Geely couldn't help but glance at Luxun again. This was because when the innkeeper asked how many rooms they needed, Geely raised a finger and said, 1 room. Luxun immediately swatted Geely's finger away and told the innkeeper 2 rooms. This made Geely's face turn completely red. She wants to move to a different town. As for Luxun needing 2 rooms, that's obviously because the author is afraid of getting 404 day. Just when Luxun was lecturing Geely to stop always eyeing his body, the sect leader told him to keep a low profile. Another guest arrived at the inn. Luxun was just casually glancing over, but after seeing who it was, he became a bit excited. This isn't Tianxuan Realm's level 985. Newbie village guide Murong Yen is it? Unfortunately, she's not quite enough to be his master. Murong Yen is quite unpretentious though. She sat on the long bench, and the bench bore a weight it shouldn't have. Murong Yen watched Luxun and the others go upstairs. When she saw Geely's wedding dress sword, she couldn't help but let out a soft sigh. She was a gentle and considerate little sister. He was a hardworking older brother who supported the family. But the two of them could never meet again, because her brother had overworked himself and died suddenly. He was transported into the cultivation world of the game he used to play, and Luxun looked once again at this unfamiliar world. The first thought that crossed his mind was, what if it's his sister? She must be heartbroken now. But thankfully he bought himself insurance. His sister Luyu is the beneficiary. That put Luxun's mind at ease a little. Your brother won't be able to accompany you anymore. In that world, you'll be alone. Brother, I will keep living strong. At this moment, the door to Luke Sun's room opened. Gila's little head peeked in to ask Luke Sun if he wanted to go with her to sell the weapons they had found. Luke Sun immediately realized that Jili was afraid he might escape. It was clear that she hadn't given up. She was still hoping to use him as a furnace. However, Luke Sun truly had no intention of running away. He told Jili not to worry, he wouldn't run. Upon hearing this, Jili gave a silly smile. She realized her little thoughts had been seen through, but she still wanted Luke Sun to go with her, and was okay if they split it 50-50 with Luke Sun. Seeing this, Luke Sun also leaned towards Jili and said he wasn't opposed to going together, but I have to agree to one of his conditions. Luke Sun's closeness already made Jila shy. Then Luke Sun said he had a condition. It immediately made Jili misinterpret. She instinctively shielded herself with her hands. Luke Sun slowly stood up at this time. Because they were too close, Jili unconsciously stepped back. Luke Sun hugged Jili and said word by word, I want to see your face under the veil. Jili, who was held by Luke Sun, was really too shy. After pushing Luke Sun away, she flusteredly said she needed to go touch up her makeup. Looking at Jili running away, Luke Sun felt helpless. He just wanted to tease Jili a little. And what could such a thin veil possibly hide? And this waiting time lasted a full half hour. Luke Sun had just heard the knocking on the door. When he opened the door, what came into his view was a bright-eyed, white-toothed, and charming face. She looked exceptionally cute and pure. Seeing such a pure girl, it was hard for Luke Sun not to laugh when he remembered that she had robbed and captured the furnace cauldron before. Luke Sun truly wanted to laugh inwardly. He immediately began to teach Jili a lesson. Don't try to find a furnace tripod at such a young age. There are many ways to become stronger in this world. Jili heard Luke Sun call her young. She puffed out her chest in defiance. She questioned Luke Sun, asking where she was small. She's quite big. Luke Sun covered his face and glanced at her. Indeed, it's quite big. At that moment, the knock on the door sounded. Jili instantly became alert, because she hadn't heard any footsteps. The visitor was an expert. After taking a quick glance, Luke Sun used the system to check the visitor. Seeing that the visitor was Murong Yan and had no ill intentions, Luke Sun reached out and opened the door, and softly asked if anything was wrong. Upon seeing Luke Sun's incredibly handsome face, Murong Yan's expression also faltered slightly. She glanced at Jili and said it was nothing, that she had gone to the wrong place. Then she waved to Luke Sun and the others and left. Luke Sun didn't believe Murong Yan's words at all. As a cultivator, how could he not sense someone inside the room? Jili beside him was also a little puzzled. Luke Sun glanced around the room. Then he looked at Jili. Seeing Luke Sun looking at her, Jili immediately misunderstood. She crossed her arms and exclaimed, sure enough, I still can't take off my veil. Luke Sun was speechless. Then he looked at the Jai sword behind Jili. He saw that a new message had appeared on the Jai sword. This sword has a low-level concealment spell cast on it. Luke Sun couldn't help but smile. It's really the familiar Tianxuan world. Indeed, they are the cultivators I remember. In this Tianxuan world, it's a world dominated by cultivators. Logically, murder, robbery, seizing good fortune, and the conflict between good and evil are standard features of the cultivation world. But in reality, it's not like that. The cultivators of this world mostly do good deeds and draw their swords to help. There are countless examples of righteous people stepping in. The immortals of this world possess immortal energy and will risk their lives for ordinary people. The heroes of this world have a sense of justice and will step forward to fight for what's right when they see injustice. Indeed, this world continues to feel so comfortable as always. At this moment, Mu Rongyan's illusion technique was in play. The bridal sword had turned into an ordinary iron sword. No one would be killing or fighting for treasures now. Jili couldn't understand what Luke Sun was thinking. She grabbed Luke Sun and ran towards the pawn shop. Luke Sun allowed Jili to pull him along. At this moment, he was very excited, simply because Murong Yan is here. One of the 3 best possible starts in the Tianxuan Realm that day. It must also be here. As long as he seizes this opportunity, he can carve out his own path. Moments later, Jili sold those weapons. Jili was overjoyed after receiving the silver. She immediately treated Luke Sun to a grand feast. Walking on the way back, Luke Sun asked Jili if he noticed anything unusual. Jili was confused when he heard this. What unusual? Luke Sun felt powerless and could only respond with another question. Didn't you find the woman who came knocking on the door suspicious? Upon hearing Luke Sun's words, Jili finally remembered. Good grief, does the fish have a 7-second memory? Then Jili asked Luke Sun what was suspicious. Luke Sun is completely messed up now. Did the nutrients get absorbed by the 2 groups earlier? This brain is a bit off. After returning to the inn, after hearing Luke Sun's explanation, Jili realized that the sister who came to knock on the door was a cultivator. Luke Sun tapped her ear and told Jili to keep it down. This is a big opportunity. Jili looked at her with admiration and asked, how's on new? Luke Sun pointed to her wedding sword. Do you see anything wrong with it? After hearing this, Jili stared at it with a wise look for a moment, then asked Luke Sun, is there a problem? Luke Sun was speechless, and so sorry I had any expectations of her. He sighed and said that the wedding dress sword had been enchanted. Jili finally understood. This means she has a celestial affinity. If she could be accepted as a disciple, she could avenge her parents. Then with a look of worship and infatuation, she looked at Luke's son and said he was so insightful. At this time, shouts were heard from outside. It turns out today is the Zhongyuan Festival, also called the Half of July, also called Ghost Festival. As soon as she heard that today is the Zhongyuan Festival, Jila's eyes slightly reddened. She missed her parents. Luke's son looked at the heavy rain falling outside the house. He missed his sister. I hope he can live well with his insurance money. At this moment, Luke's son hears Jayla's call. He sees Jayla pointing at her wedding dress sword. She asks Luke's son what's going on. Luke's son looks at the prompt on the wedding dress sword. The corners of his mouth can't help but curve up. His chance for a comeback has come. This man was not only taken by a cute girl as a furnace for cultivation, but also for double duties. He was even chosen as a mount by this cat-eared girl, simply because he's so handsome. When Jayla's wedding dress sword issued a warning, Luke's son understood that his opportunity had arrived. He pulled Jayla and started walking towards the outside. Agilius, what could be outside? Luke's mischievous nature surfaced. Of course, it's a ghost in the middle of the night, and it made Jayla look outside the house. She saw that there really were hundreds of ghosts marching outside. They were different from the ghosts formed on Blue Star. The ghosts of the Tianxuan Realm are formed by gathered resentment. If we follow the game's terminology, today is the Zhongyuan Festival. That event is the ghost-killing contest. At this moment, Luke's son's eyes were almost fixed in place. This 100 Pouches night walk is basically an experience pack. As for Jili, she was staring at the Jishi beast. Of course, she was directly scared unconscious. With no other choice, Luke's son had to carry Jili and head outside the house. This opportunity can't be missed. At this moment, Jili groggily opened her eyes. She noticed that Luke's son was holding her. Jili blushed and asked Luke's son if he could put her down. Luke's son didn't care about that. He patted Jili's bottom and told her to stay quiet. We'll be there soon. This made Jili feel extremely embarrassed. She cursed inwardly, thinking that next time, she definitely shouldn't have faint. After they reached the outside of the house, Jili saw Mirongyan sitting in front of the house. I couldn't help but admire her. She truly lives up to being a practitioner. While ghosts are running rampant, she stands guard at the gate ensuring everyone's safety. But when I went in to look, it turned out Mirongyan was just sitting there eating sunflower seeds. Jilaran was stunned. So it turns out she was just indulging herself in fantasy. A sound suddenly came from the group of vengeful spirits. In the midst of the vengeful spirits, a little girl was hopping around, giggling. She looked especially excited. She had a hairstyle like Nedge's on her head. She was an adorable little loli. At this moment, she seemed to notice someone approaching. She was just casually looking around. Upon seeing Luke's son's appearance, the little girl was stunned. How could someone look so good? But because she was dazed, the ghost strike hit the ribbon in her hair. The ribbon broke, revealing the little girl's cat ears. This made the cat-eared girl furious. Immediately, 2 small knives appeared in her hands. Swing forward. In an instant, dozens of meters of blade energy swept toward those evil spirits. You can still hear the cat-eared loli's cute, childish shout. I'll slash you all. Meanwhile, Luke's son could only watch helplessly as a large amount of experience points disappeared before him. But to be able to one-shot so many evil spirits, this cat-eared loli must be at least level 40. After dealing with the vengeful ghost, the cat-eared loli stormed towards the inn. Just as she was about to say something to Luke's son, the height difference between them caused the cat-eared loli's momentum to deflate. The air suddenly fell silent. The cat-eared loli didn't like looking up at others, so she floated to the air. Then Grandma asked Luke's son, "This seat still lacks a beautiful mount. Would you be willing?" And the cat-eared little loli in front of me was clearly a demon. So-called demon is a creature that has gained intelligence. They are just like those described in mythological stories. Occasionally they gain intelligence, absorbing the essence of the sun and moon to cultivate the body, strengthening one's cultivation. But the essence of the sun and moon isn't easy to absorb, so they usually have to wake up earlier than the rooster, sleep later than the dog, work harder than the ox. Their path of cultivation is even more difficult, and often takes decades. It may take even hundreds of years to see any results. After such a long period of time, they continuously strengthen themselves, constantly improving themselves, making themselves more exceptional. They became the mounts of immortals. However, on Blue Star, as long as you have money, some are a few hundred. Some are even tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands. Don't misunderstand me, I'm talking about cars. The cat-eared little girl saw that Luke's son didn't respond to her. She continued to speak in a sweet, high-pitched voice. My name is Maobei. It would be an honor for you to be my mount. Luke's son's heart stirred slightly at the name. She's a major demon who only appears in the mid-game, and her catgirl image is incredibly popular. She's a huge favorite among the players. Countless people are willing to become her mount. But Luke's son certainly doesn't want to start the game as someone's mount. Mirongyan, standing nearby, couldn't listen any longer. She stepped forward and advised him. Isn't this inappropriate, Junior Uncle Master? Jila's mouth dropped in surprise at the address. Is the Junior Uncle Master this young? The cat-eared little loli sat on Mirongyan's shoulder. She didn't care about what was said. Tilting her little head, she indicated that rules are meant to be broken. Then she turned to ask Luke's son how he felt about it. As long as I become her mount, I can have whatever I want. She was standing beside Luke's son. Couldn't help but worry that Luke's son wouldn't be able to resist the temptation. But at this moment, Luke's son smiled, a very gentle smile. But in the eyes of these girls, it was a smile that could captivate a nation. And at this time, Luke's son softly asked a question. "You very strong?" The cat-eared little girl confidently replies, "Of course. You saw me cut down over 100 evil spirits with one strike just now." Luke's son continues to play dumb and asks, "Is your set also very powerful?" Of course, the little girl responds. Luke's son pretends to act shy and says, "Could we go visit your sect first? Then he'll decide." And that's his ultimate goal. As long as he can go to her sect, his perfect start is secured. She doesn't like people haggling. But Luke's son, acting all charming, just looked at the cat-eared little loli. No one can resist a green tea's offensive. Especially not Luke's son with his maxed-out green tea looks. The cat-eared loli couldn't refuse at all. Then she agreed. Seeing the cat-eared loli agree, Luke's son nudged Jilly beside him. He whispered to her, "Quickly play the victim, only then will they take you as a disciple." But the innocent Jilly didn't know how to do that. She was completely dumbfounded. Luke's son clicked his tongue when he saw this. As expected, unreliable. It still has to be me. Really, I have to play both father and mother. Then he began to tell Murong Yan and the others about Jilly's background and experiences, with Luke's son subtly embellishing the story. Even Jilly, the person involved, was, "I realized how miserable I was. I almost burst into tears." Murong Yan is such a nice person. After hearing Luke's son's words, the way he looked at Jila changed. After Luke's son finished speaking, he directly pressed down on Jila's head, wanting her to bow, then make the request to join the sect. In the end, the hand was about to break but still couldn't press it. Luke's son's hand went numb. Very good. He's going to be stuck here today. She's a gentle and considerate good sister. He's a hardworking and caring good brother. But the two can never meet again. Because his older brother died suddenly from overwork, he was transported into the Tianxuan world of the game he played. Although Luke's son could imagine his sister would be very sad, fortunately he had bought insurance, with his sister as the beneficiary. Luke's son will also in this Tianxuan world live on strongly. But reality struck him a heavy blow. It almost made him want to spit blood. This was because when testing his root bone aptitude, only one circle appeared. The maximum level is 10 circles. This was the first time for the three girls as well. They all showed a look of disdain towards Luke's son. Seeing this, Luke's son really wanted to spit blood. It was at this moment that he remembered when he first created this alternate account. He maximized his looks, although Luke's son doesn't regret it, forced a smile. Behind Luke's son, Jilly has already made up her mind. She will definitely train hard. Then she will protect Luke's son in the demon sect. This is because when Jilly tested her bone and talent aptitude, the number of circles she scored reached a high of 8. She was only one circle behind the cat girl Cat Nambai. As for why I call it the demon sect, because Mao Nambai and the others are from the demon sect, a sect of the demonic path. When Jilly first heard this news, she was quite startled. But with Luke's son's nod of approval, Jilly was still willing to become a disciple of this demon sect. And in this Tianxuan Realm, the righteous path is led by the 4 great sects. They are Wanjin Mountain, Yijian Mountain, Qingshan sect, and Lo Shanzong. It seems the names of the 4 major sects individually don't present any problems. But if you pair them up, they look rather comical no matter how you look at it. The first 2 seem incompatible. The last 2 look very bro in nature. In fact, that's exactly the case. The Sword Mountain and the 10,000 Sword Mountain were originally one, called Sword Mountain. However, one faction believes that 10,000 swords returning to one is the essence. They study a whole bunch of sword techniques. They seek to understand the way of the sword through a variety of sword styles. While another faction believes, one sword breaks 10,000 laws is the essence of the sword path. Therefore, he spent his whole life practicing only one sword, a particularly unique style. Then the 2 groups split because of disagreements. As for the Qingshan sect and the Lo Shanzong, their names were purely a result of their founders' fondness for using the character Qi in heaven. Essentially, the 2 sects have no relationship. As for the so-called heretical demons, they are headed by the 3 major demonic sects, namely Chungqiu Forest, Wuji Mountain, and finally the most straightforward demonic sect. The name speaks for itself. And at this moment, the demonic sect is recruiting new members. This is also why Jilly, with her clean background, was able to join. After a day of gathering supplies, Murong Yan and the others were preparing to take Luke's son and the others back to the sect. Jilly was curious about how Murong Yan was going to carry her large bundle. Just then, the ring on Murong Yan's hand flashed with light. The large bundle was sucked into the ring. Jilly, a country bumpkin, had never seen a storage ring. Her eyes were wide with amazement. Then Murong Yan and the others were ready to depart, because Murong Yan was a typical sword cultivator, so she flew on her sword, but her sword and she simply didn't match. With Murong Yan's weight on that magic sword, it so grew. But thankfully there's Mao Nambai. With a flick of her small hand, a paper crane appeared in her hand. Then with a toss forward, the paper crane instantly grew larger. Carrying 3 people is no problem at all. Mao Nambai and Jilly easily jumped onto the paper crane's back. Without cultivation, Luke Sun could only climb up with a ladder. A moment later, the group officially set off for the demon sect. At this point, Mao Nambai took out a small booklet and handed it to Jili. This is the entry-level cultivation method of the demon sect. Just right for Jili to learn, but Luke Sun won't be able to. It's only because Luke Sun hasn't become her mount yet. It has nothing to do with the demon sect. Luke Sun at this moment perfectly managed to put on a slightly disappointed expression, then said in a fawning manner, "It's fine if he doesn't study cultivation techniques, but could he at least touch a Xian family's cultivation technique?" Well, Mao Nambai simply couldn't resist. He handed the martial arts technique to Luke Sun. Of course, he couldn't help but sarcastically say that Luke Sun was useless. Luke Sun chuckled himself when he saw this. Although your name is Cat Nambai, there's a type of sneaky, despicable person who's actually called a dog thing. But as long as Luke Sun gets the martial arts technique, he can learn it directly. Didn't they expect that, did you? I just need to touch it. It is yours but also mine now? Although Lu chose to study, he didn't inject experience points into this cultivation method. This is because he wanted to achieve the perfect start he mentioned earlier. Choosing any cultivation method is not allowed. In the Tianxuan Realm, there are 3 almost impossible starting points. Entering the magic sect's small study room is one of them. The goal is to become a disciple of the owner of the little study. However, among the billions of gamers in the past life, only one person was accepted as a disciple, but not much information about the little study owner was passed on by this person. Because this lucky one had poor health to begin with, and overplayed the game, resulting in sudden death, at first Luke Sun was quite jealous of that guy. As a result, he now faces the same outcome. At this moment, Mirong Yan, who was flying by sword nearby, explained the rules of the demon sect to Luke Sun and the others. The reason it wasn't Cat Nambai who explained was because she didn't know what the specific rules were. So the first reminder from Mirong Yan was not to follow Cat Nambai. This left Cat Nambai feeling a bit frustrated. However, the demon sect does indeed have rules, and all these rules come from the master of that small study. Soon after Mao Nambai finished her explanation, she began explaining the key points. The demon sect is mainly divided into 3 areas. They are the outer sect area and the small study in the back mountain. Saying this, she pointed at Jili, indicating that she was an outer sect disciple. Mirongyan is an inner sect disciple. Then she pointed at herself and arrogantly said, "I am the direct disciple of Mr. Little Study. Even my mount belongs to the senior generation of inner sect disciples." Luke Sun sneered inwardly upon hearing this. That glance was obviously directed at him. On the other hand, Jili seemed quite surprised. "I can't believe there's a little study and a mister in the demon sect." She foolishly asked, "Do you still have to study even after joining the demon sect?" Her question immediately made Mao Nambai laugh. She explained to Jili that it wasn't the case. It's just that the master prefers being addressed as master. However, Luke Sun knows a little bit. In this Tianxuan realm, no one knows how strong the master really is. In a past life, some people said that the master wasn't the final boss. He directly live-streamed himself eating shit. The master's class is clearly evident. This man clearly has no cultivation. Yet he dared to leap down from a height of 108,000 li above the ground. Time passed unknowingly. Luke Sun and the others soon arrived at the sect. Jill was puzzled. Why didn't she see the sect? Mao Nambai smiled faintly at these words. He took out a paper crane. Then he tossed the paper crane forward. The paper crane flying forward was suddenly stopped. It was then shattered immediately. This startled Jili. It turned out that to enter the demon sect, one must have a sect token. But Mirong Yan's token only allows her to pass through alone. Only high-ranking tokens like Mao Nambai's can allow multiple people to pass. Meanwhile, Mao Nambai didn't forget to show off to Luke Sun, saying that this great formation was arranged by her master. As Mao Nambai raised her token, a vortex passage appeared before them. As for Luke Sun, he had secretly resolved to become the master's disciple. He knows exactly what Cat North and South means. It means she wants him to be her mount and desires his body. Luke Sun now feels that having too much beauty is not a good thing. Every woman in this world is after his body. They either want to capture a furnace or a mount. His waist can take it. At that moment, with a flash of light, the scene in front of them instantly changed. The mountain peaks stretch endlessly with a misty, celestial aura, truly magnificent. If you told me this was the righteous sect, I'd believe it. It doesn't have the overwhelming demonic aura, or the feeling of bloodshed from the lake of blood in Mount Hushan as I imagine. At this moment, Mao Nambai said, "It doesn't matter if you can remember the rules of the demon sect, but you must remember one thing. Act with a heart free of guilt." At this moment, the mountain peak everyone is flying towards is called the Jian Peak. Mirongyan introduced to Luke Sun and the others. The origin of this mountain is quite significant. This also piqued the curiosity of Luke Sun and the others. Seeing that the goal was achieved, Mirongyan shook her finger and said mysteriously, "The origin of this mountain is very important. It's just that its origin is not small. Just that its origin is quite significant." Mao Nambai directly threw a punch. "So you're the number one in talking nonsense, huh?" Luke Sun and the others were speechless. The last time Zhang Si heard such outrageous words was back then. At this moment, the patrolling disciples on Jivan Peak immediately stepped forward and respectfully said, "We respectfully welcome our junior uncle master back to the sect." The paper crane landed on the peak of Jivan. As they jumped off the paper crane, except for someone. Then Kat Nambe reached out and waved. The paper crane returned to her hand. She instructed the patrolling disciple, "Go summon Elder Kishui for me. Tell him I've brought back a promising new recruit." Elder Kyoshu, an outer sect elder, arrived soon. The person who arrived was not an old man, but rather a seductive and curvaceous mature woman. The next moment Elder Kyushui was stunned. Why is there such an attractive person? Naturally, she assumed that the prospect mentioned by Mao Nanbi was referring to Luke Sun. Mao Nanbe directly blocked Elder Kosh with sunlight and denied it. Then she said that Luke Sun is her mount. He couldn't help but laugh inwardly. Senior Uncle Zhu is really good at this. At this moment, Mirongya nudged the ignored Ji Li. She said Ji Li is the real gem. Her talent is as high as 8 rings. When Elder Kyushui heard this, he got excited and grabbed Ji Li's hands. "This is a real treasure we found." But Ji Li's high talent, his handsomeness still can't be concealed. Elder Kyushui pointed at Luke Sun and curiously asked about his qualifications. Mao Nanbe raised a finger in response. Everyone was stunned. How could someone have 10 rings? Is he a reincarnated immortal? Mao Nanbe's lips twitched. He muttered 1 ring. The onlookers immediately dispersed. This is too realistic. At this time Luke Sun asked Mao Nanba if he wanted to become a disciple of the demon sect. Would it be enough to simply pass the outer sect's assessment? Mao Nanbe glanced at Luke Sun and nodded. However, Luke Sun's next words left everyone present stunned. He looked at him incredulously, wondering where he got the confidence to say such things. Just based on his mediocre qualifications, it's only because Luke Sun said, "If you want to become the master's disciple." But Mao Nanbai smiled. He felt quite smug inside. He's worthy of being the mount I chose. Ambitious, inspiring. Then appreciating Luke Sun's suitability. The master had different reasons for taking on disciples. When he took her as his disciple, it was also because the master wanted to pet a cat at that time. And this time the reason is also simple. Just 3 conditions. Then he asked Luke Sun if she wanted to know. Luke Sun. The strategy that kid used to find a master in his past life. He studied it for 3 whole days. Seeing this, Mao Nanbai stated the first condition. That is, he must be immortal without cultivation. Second, his age must be under 30. Hearing this, Luke Sun realized he met both requirements. Mao Nanbai told Luke Sun not to rush. There's also the third condition. That is, jump down from here and survive. You have to know, the peak of guiding is a staggering 100,000 miles above the ground. Even someone with cultivation would die if they jumped down. Luke smiled. He saw that the system had popped up a hidden quest to enter the small study. Then he turned around and ran toward the edge of the cliff. Everyone was startled. Luke Sun waved goodbye to them. Seeing this, they immediately tried to stop him, but an invisible force pressed down on them, rendering them immobile. Meanwhile, Luke Sun reached the cliff edge and made an elegant gesture, before leaping off in a dramatic jump of faith. After Lu jumped off the cliff, the oppressive force on Mao Nanbai and the others disappeared. Jila was so moved that tears started to well up in her eyes. She couldn't believe that an ordinary person could survive by jumping off from here. Meanwhile, Nanbai was shocked and puzzled about where the force that had suppressed them earlier came from. So, they decided to go down to the bottom of the cliff to take a look. As Mao Nanbai and the others flew toward the bottom of the mountain. Moments later, when Mao Nanbai landed at the foot of the mountain, looking at the person before her, she didn't know what to say. Luke Sun's condition was simply appalling. From the neck down, it was indescribable. Just smashed to pieces. Could this be the end? The protagonist, he's gone. He fell to his death from a height of tens of thousands of miles. He was smashed to pieces, blood and flesh in a mess. This made the beautiful elder feel quite regretful. She hadn't even tasted it yet, and it's already gone. At this moment, a group of people arrived. It turned out to be the sect leader of the demon sect. The person was wearing a black robe with golden threads and was quite short, and he was completely bald. This was due to his main focus on fire-based cultivation, resulting in him being completely hairless, and the Ludan sect master was also drawn here by an invisible force, generated when Luke Sun jumped off the cliff. Manambe curiously asked, "Sect master, do you know the source of that force?" The Ludan sect master shook his head, indicating he didn't know. Even with his cultivation, he couldn't sense it. Manambe understood. It's obvious that there is something wrong with the Luke Sun I brought back. At this moment, Monambai suddenly froze. She quickly walked towards Luke Sun. Turns out that Luke Sun had used up one of his revives. At this point, he only had a sliver of health left. But now this is a problem. The master's not in the sect right now. Luke Sun, he jumped on his own. However, at this moment a clear and pleasant voice was heard, but the speech was very slow. Sir Can. And lying on the ground like a puddle of mud, Luke Sun, his system task information also changed. His hidden task had been completed. It turned out that the voice just now came from the second disciple of the master. He was the second uncle of everyone present, third senior sister of Mount Emby. 2.5 days have passed. On the back mountain of the Devil Sect's forbidden area, a lively young girl carrying a small bamboo basket is walking. This person is none other than Jila. At this moment, she is wearing the Devil Sect's uniform, which perfectly outlines her figure. When she walked through the bamboo forest, it was just like the other day. She saw a woman meditating in the bamboo grove. Jilly, carrying a bamboo basket, bent down to greet her. Greetings, Elder Martial Aunt. And that person was indeed the second disciple of the master. Elder Martial Aunt Mao had told her, the second senior sister doesn't like talking and prefers peace. After the ceremony, we should leave quickly. But what piqued Jilly's curiosity was how long second granduncle would meditate. Then, passing through the bamboo forest, she arrived at the small study. Upon learning that Luxun wasn't dead, Jilly volunteered to take on the responsibility of caring for Luxun. After all, it was obvious that Mao Nanbei wouldn't know how to take care of someone. At this moment, Luxun was still unconscious, but his body was no longer as badly damaged. Jilly was carefully taking care of Luxun. Although Jilly had never served anyone before her family was wiped out, she was also the young mistress of the household. But now she was more than willing to care for Luxun. In this world, she only has Luxun left as a close person. Then Jilly took out a small porcelain bottle from her bosom. She poured out a pill and fed it to Luxun. This was also given by the sect master. Luxun needs to take one pill every 2.5 hours. It helps his injuries to recover. After feeding Luxun, Jilly looked at his rosy lips. She couldn't help but blush. What could these beautiful lips taste like? Outside the small study on the other side, the disturbed cat now couldn't help but open its little mouth and yawn. Seeing that the visitor wasn't the sect leader, but Lu Dan, who else could it be? He came to check on how Luxun was recovering. But is it really that simple? No, it's not. Although he is the renowned leader of the demon sect, he has a personality trait. He's extremely stingy. The spiritual pill he gave to Luxun caused him great pain, so he tried to make up for it somewhere else. Inside the room, Jilly was hesitating whether to kiss. She was startled by a knock on the door from outside. Flushed and shy, she yelled, "Who's there?" The leader of the Braised Egg sect entered and said, "It's me." He amiably stated that he came to visit his junior uncle, but in reality, the leader of the Braised Egg sect's heart was far from calm. It would be more accurate to say he was furious, angry, and heartbroken. That was his legendary top-grade spirit pill, the one that could regenerate flesh and bone. He wouldn't even give such a treasure to his own disciples. However, since he'd given such a precious item, he had to take something back today. Immediately, with a sinister expression, he reached out toward Luxun. And after all these days of influence, Jilly knew about the sect leader's notorious stinginess. Now could he be planning to do something to Lu? Suddenly, the Salted Egg sect leader called out to Jilly. Jilly turned around stiffly in fear. She asked if there was something the sect leader needed. However, the Salted Egg sect leader smiled very kindly at Jilly. Under Jilly's surprised gaze, the Lu Dan sect master took out a pitifully small yin jing, asking Jilly to carry it. It would be very beneficial to her, because Jilly's constitution is extremely suitable for cultivating fire attribute cultivation methods. This made Jilly puzzled. Why would the stingy sect master give her a crystal? It turned out that this Lu Dan sect master, the goal from beginning to end was Jilly. He wanted to take Jilly as his disciple. According to the rules of the demon sect, when an outer disciple is promoted to an inner disciple, the elders who favor the disciple may extend an olive branch. If multiple elders are interested in the disciple then enters the stage of rejection. With Jiley's talent, it's needless to say that she would get to choose. So the Egg Master is here to leave a good impression on Jilly. And the reason why the Egg Master behaves this way as a sect leader is because for decades no highly talented disciples have joined his sect. It's because the Egg Master is too stingy, and he still hasn't realized that his stinginess is the reason he has no disciples. On the other hand, running now, Nanbei reverted to her original form. She dashed towards her third senior sister. Not far from her second senior sister, Mao Nanbei leaped towards her second senior sister, but her second senior sister simply reached out and grabbed Mao Nanbei by the scruff of her neck. Mao Nanbei tried to resist, but her second senior sister immediately gave her a sharp rap on the head, a heavy blow to the head. Unable to resist second senior sister's big hand, Mao Nanbei could only accept his fate and let his second senior sister pet him. He squinted comfortably and let out a soft meow. Second senior sister smiled slightly upon seeing this. The male lead, who had been shattered and turned into a mosaic after the fall, finally woke up after being unconscious for 2.5 days. Not only that, his body had fully recovered. He can sing, dance, and rap right after landing. Even Mao Nanbei praised Luxun's physique. It would be a waste not to use him as a mount. But Luxun also wondered how he recovered so quickly. Jilly explained that it was the elixir given by the sect master. At this time, Mao Nanbei asked Luxun a question. That is why he, immortal, could jump from a height of 108,000 lions survive. Luxun answered very readily upon hearing this. He only said 2 words. Secret. Looking at Luxun's top-tier looks, even if Mao Nanbei and the others had many more questions, they couldn't bring themselves to ask them. Seeing this, Luxun breathed a sigh of relief. He was glad he had managed to get away with it. Speaking of which, the demon sect really does hide a priceless treasure without an owner. I'll go get it when my level is higher. Mao Nanbei noticed Luxun seemed to be lost in thought. He waved his hand at him, asking what he was thinking about. Did you forget something? This made Luke Sun suspicious. What else is there? Ma Nambai said with a proud and smug expression. You haven't called me senior sister yet. At the moment Nambai was feeling full of confidence. Luke Sun performed a swift move, gazing at Jili and saying, Haven't you forgotten something? Jili stood there stunned. What is it that she has forgotten? In the next moment Luke Sun and Mao Nambai moved in perfect synchrony. You haven't called me little martial uncle ancestor yet. Jili's small round face turned red. She held back for a long time before awkwardly saying, Little martial uncle ancestor, hello. Luke Sun's nose almost reached the sky when he heard it. Then he casually and quickly called out Sister Mao Nambai. Mao Nambai immediately bristled. How dare you brush me off? Believe it or not, I'll bite you. However, Luke Sun went straight for a cuddle. He softly asked Mao Nambai if he was willing. Mao Nambai. Then he changed the subject, saying he'd go with her. His second senior sister wanted to see him. Luke smiled slightly. Sure enough, being handsome allows you to do whatever you want. On the other side, in the bamboo forest, where the second senior sister resides, Ma Nambai brought Luke Sun here. Luke Sun gave a slight bow and said, Greetings, second senior sister. Luke Sun had heard of his second senior sister in his past life. Her name is Gu Mo. Many players found her to be very cute. However, no one had ever seen her true appearance. But there are rumors that... I don't know where they heard it from. At this time, the second senior sister threw something to Luke Sun. Luke Sun caught. Unexpectedly, it was the *shiki* cultivation technique he had already learned. There were also many annotations on it. For newcomers, that's a treasure. Unfortunately, it's useless to him, a player with cheats. But after all, this is second senior sister's kind intention. While Luke Sun thanked second senior sister, he also focused his attention on Ma Nambai. The meaning was very clear. Second senior sister has already given a gift. Shouldn't you also show some response? Ma Nambai felt uneasy under his stare. He had no idea where this kid was getting so much information from. Then she rummaged through her small treasure trove. She took out a storage ring and handed it to Luke Sun. Luke Sun immediately accepted it. He said, Thank you, senior sister. Immediately after, Luke Sun's system prompt popped up. Obtained a storage ring. Equip. After equipping backpack space 30. Manan then said, Don't think she's stingy, because she can't use more advanced things. Right now? Luxon turned around and replied sincerely after hearing this. What fourth senior sister gave me is naturally worth a fortune. How could I possibly be ungrateful? This immediately made Mao Nambi blush furiously. Why can he be so cool? The second senior sister waved her hand. She signaled everyone to leave. Mao Nambi then pulled Luke Sun away. Luke Sun, glancing at the second senior sister, couldn't help but think, she doesn't seem to talk much. Could that news be true? On the way back, Jili, feeling playful, caught fireflies there. Luke Sun asked curiously when he saw this, Why is she so happy? Jili, hearing this, said joyfully, Because you woke up. Luke Sun understood. The reason for her happiness was him. Luke Sun then gestured for Jili to come closer. Jili obediently walked toward Luke Sun. She shyly and expectantly asked what Luke Sun was going to do. Looking at her silly expression, Luke Sun gave Jili a flick on the forehead. Jili covered her forehead and shouted, Why did you flick me? She'd been so expectant. Luke Sun laughed. Junior martial uncle can flick whoever he wants. So many His words had just left his mouth when his forehead was also flicked. It was Mao Nambai who had done it. Mao Nambai, It's okay if senior sister flicks you, right? Luke Sun was speechless. It didn't need to be that hard though. This is not a mistake at all. It's simply a conspiracy. The group happily returned to the little study. At this moment, Jili was momentarily stunned. She realized it just now. Luke Sun has already recovered. What is she doing following them back? Her task was originally to take care of Lu Shi. Now that Luke Sun has woken up, her task is complete. Is she about to be driven away? At the same time, Luke Sun asked Mao Nemba if he could lend the key cultivation method that second senior sister gave him to Jili for study. Mao Nambi casually waved his hand and said that he could arrange it however he wanted. Jili watched Mao Nambi walk back to her room. Her pretty face flushed red again. Now she was going to be alone with Luke Sun. At this moment, Luke Sun walked towards Jili. Then he placed a hand on Jili's shoulder. Luke Sun then leaned close to Jili's ear and whispered softly, "Come inside with me." So bold. Late at night, this man actually invited the girl into his room. Is this something I can watch without spending money? Jili, who was invited, was also looking forward to it. After all, she had been eyeing Luke Sun for a long time. Jili even proactively sat on the edge of the bed, hinting, "This bed can fit both of us, you know." Meanwhile, in another room, two pairs of nimble ears twitched. Clearly eavesdropping. Mao Nambe heard that humans are always in a certain state. Because of her cultivation, she's never experienced it, so she's curious. So she eavesdropped all night, but she was very disappointed. She wanted to pry open Luke Sun's head to see what he was thinking, because Luke Sun refused Jili's invitation, saying he needed to cultivate, and Luke Sun really did exactly that, leaving Jili staring longingly at Luke Sun. In the end, Jili could only start cultivating like Luke Sun. However, she first had to memorize the annotated key control method Luke Sun gave her. Before she could begin her cultivation, she had to get it right. And after a moment, just like when everyone is studying, She ended up falling asleep right away. Meanwhile, Luxun, who was standing aside, originally wanted to use the system upgrade, but he really wanted to try what real cultivation felt like. In Hojing's novel, cultivation is described as an extremely pleasant experience, to the extent that it has given rise to various forms of dual cultivation, and the purpose of this is to obtain double the pleasure. Thus Luxun began his first cultivation in his life. When he circulated his energy, a sharp pain suddenly struck him. This puzzled him. That's not how the book described it. Now his body felt like countless needles were piercing him. Meanwhile, in the small bamboo forest, sitting on a rock, the second senior sister tilted her head. She was somewhat concerned about her junior brother's cultivation progress. Back in the small study, Luxun gritted his teeth at this moment. He did not stop his path of cultivation. Instead, he cultivated even harder. If cultivation really felt so great, then why is cultivating immortality still so difficult? It's precisely because it doesn't feel great that cultivation is hard. Luxun really did believe that a little refining could kill him. Time quickly arrived at the morning of the next day. When Geely opened her eyes in a daze, she looked at Luxun with admiration. She knew that cultivation was full of pain, but Luxun had actually cultivated the entire night. This made Geely's favorability toward him rise continuously, but Luxun didn't know this. He looked at Geely in confusion and thought, how is it that he can still gain affection points while bleeding from all 7 orifices? Meanwhile, the second senior sister, who had been concerned about Luxun the entire night, smiled slightly, feeling very satisfied in her heart. She was pleased with Luxun's character. Inside the room, Luxun leaned against Geely, supporting her aching back. Geely curiously asked, does it hurt? Luxun nodded through her tears. She gave Geely a vivid and detailed metaphor. It felt like 100 wrong mammas were stabbing me with needles. Aren't you scared? But Geely said she wasn't afraid. This time Luxun was curious. Geely was silent for a moment before slowly explaining the reason. In this world, nothing is more painful than losing my father and mother. Luxun was instantly stunned. Then she immediately spoke to Geely and brought up her sad story. Geely shook her head, signaling that it was fine. She would try her best to cultivate and live on. Then, feeling a bit sad, she said to Luxun, I won't be able to take care of you anymore. Now I have to go back to the outer sect. But I really don't want to leave. She said goodbye to Luxun. Geely was afraid that if she continued talking, she would really be unwilling to leave. After all, she didn't know how long it would be before she could see Luxun again. But then Luxun directly pinched Geely's little face. What are you doing? Making it sound like a life and death separation. You little fool. You can't come up, but I can go see you. You are my only friend in this world. Geely's affection for him skyrocketed again. Luxun felt helpless inside. This affection is growing without regard for the occasion. The warm moment is completely ruined. A moment later, Geely went down the mountain. She waved goodbye to Luxun, telling him to take care of himself. Luxun. He would definitely be able to take care of himself. And if Chao is lucky, when the player arrives in the Tianxuan Realm, he might just encounter his sister playing the game of heaven. It's very possible. Luxun made up his mind to practice hard. When he finds his sister in the future, he will be able to protect her. But after practicing all night, his experience only increased by 20. He had previously stored up 666 experience points. With a comprehension of 1, it really isn't working. Luxun didn't think too much and directly clicked to level up. As for his comprehension, he would figure it out later. But now Luxun's stomach started growling again. At the same time, the braised egg sect leader arrived. Luxun was quite puzzled. Why did this stingy old miser come? Was he here to ask for money for the elixir? But that wasn't the case. The sect leader came for another reason. It was because the master had accepted Luxun as a disciple, to hold a celebration. Came to inform Luke. At this time, a system prompt popped up. Trigger sect reputation task accept. Task reward 10,000 experience and special attribute points. Luxun saw this and thought perfect. His celebration is a great place to gain reputation. He accepted the task. He then told the Ludan sect master that he would definitely arrive. The Ludan sect master nodded after hearing that. Then he went to prepare. Meanwhile, Luxun had already started looking forward to his task reward. However, the most urgent matter now was to deal with his hunger first. With the task successfully accepted, his reputation progress was already at 900, and he needed a total of 2,000. Suddenly a loud roar was heard. It turned out that Luxun went to find Mao Nambe to help him catch fish for food. This made Mao Nambe extremely angry. He questioned whether Luxun knew his own identity and status. But after Luxun made tea and explained that he was a chef, Mao Nambe turned around faster than flipping a book. In a flash he was gone. When Mao Nambe returned, I've already caught 2 big fish and a kun. Then I threw them in front of Luxun. Luxun praised Mao Nambe profusely. But that wasn't what he truly thought. He, with his 800 schemes, thought to himself Mao Nambe is a truly useful hunting cat. Then Mao Nambe led Luxun to the kitchen of the small bookstore. Luxun began his cooking journey. The fish scales have been scraped off. The vegetables have been chopped. Then heat the oil in the pan. Soon after, when the aroma fills the air, Cat Nambe couldn't help but drool. They rushed straight into the kitchen. Just as they were about to dig in, Luxun said one thing. I want to bring some food for second senior sister to eat together. Are you sure you want to do this now? This abruptly stopped Mao Nambi's pouncing movement. Then Mao Nambi picked up the food box. While second senior sister smelled the fragrant food, Mao Nambi had already run over and said to second senior sister, "Come and try the junior brother's cooking. But how do we divide 2 fish and a crab?" After only hesitating for 2.5 seconds, Mao Nambi started to operate. She directly gave a piece of fish and a chicken leg to the second senior sister. Just as Luke Sun wondered if someone as immortal and refined as the second senior sister would need to eat, the second senior sister had already started eating. Mao Nambi also took out a large fish, preparing to take a big bite. Luke Sun shouted, "Leave a little for him." Watching them bicker so happily and warmly, it really reminded me of that saying, humanity's everyday warmth soothes the hearts of mortals. Soon after, they all started rubbing their round bellies. Mao Nambi was the first to burp, but before long even the second senior sister burped. This made Luke Sun and Mao Nambi's eyes widen in shock. However, the second senior sister still maintained her aloof demeanor. Well, no matter what happens, Chun, it can never collapse. How handsome is this man after putting on the outfit? It made this little cat demon want to devour him immediately. After the second senior sister was fed by Luke Sun and fell into a trance, they were also driven away by second senior sister. On the way back, Luke Sun curiously asked Mao Nambi, "When will the master of the small study return to the sect?" Mao Nambi replied that she didn't know. Luke Sun, puzzled, continued to ask, "Did the master go down the mountain for something? Is he fighting with other righteous sects?" As a result, in the next second, Luke Sun was stunned. The answer given by Mao Nambi was actually to go play. Good grief, it was actually to play. Someone of that level from the demon sect? Aren't they supposed to bully men, dominate women, and bring disaster to the world? Suddenly a system notification popped up. The game forum has opened. This made Luke Sun feel a bit strange. There are still 3 years until the players arrive. Is the forum open this early? Or is it that the flow of time in the 2 worlds isn't consistent at all? So before the game goes into open beta, he'll need to make a name for himself. After all, players will only follow those who have prestige. And tomorrow he can make good use of his celebration. The next day arrived. Luke's a nut. He had finished a whole night of training. His experience points had also risen to 606. Then Mao Nambi. He came to drag Luke Sun to change his clothes. Then they were going to prepare for the celebration. Seeing this, how could Luke Sun not know that this playful little cat, she wanted to join the fun. So the one who always loves to sleep in, woke up early today. As for her wanting to take advantage of the situation and watch him change clothes, Luke Sun directly grabbed her by the back of her neck and threw her outside. This made Nambi furious. She muttered, "Who wants to watch anyway?" He only says it, but his eyes can't help but glance inside. Although he can't see anything. A moment later, the door opened. Luke Sun walked out. This is also the first time Luke Sun wore the black robe, symbolizing his position as a junior grandmaster of the demon sect. He looked absolutely stunning. Mao Nambi was completely mesmerized. She couldn't even speak properly. Luke Sun smiled slightly at her when he noticed. Mao Nambi couldn't take it anymore. She covered her flushed, heated face and ran outside. She feared she wouldn't be able to control the urge. She might end up pinning Luke Sun down and devouring him. Luke Sun discovered that this robe was actually a magical item. He glanced at the information that appeared from the system. It was a robe made of rare materials but with no added attributes. In simple terms, it was a luxurious, attribute-less fashion item. At this moment, Mao Nambi returned, but his face was covered in scratches. It turned out that Mao Nambi, in an attempt to calm down, had gone into a frenzy and scratched himself. On the way there, Luke Sun curiously asked Mao Nambi, "Senior sister, did you give a speech at the celebration?" Mao Nambi proudly replied, "Of course I did." "So what did you talk about?" Mao Nambi made a slashing gesture across her throat. "Don't mess with me, or I'll cut you down with one strike." Alright, Luke Sun can already imagine the expression of the demon sect disciples back then. At this moment, Mao Nambi reached into his bosom and took out a mount. It has to be something with a bit of style. How can we go on foot? Soon they arrived at the demon sect's plaza. The demon sect disciples, upon seeing Luke Sun, were gasps of surprise erupted. Their new junior uncle is so handsome, it makes one's legs go weak. Meanwhile, Luke Sun's reputation was rapidly growing, but the note made Luke Sun wary. Mao Nambi then said to Luke Sun, "It's your turn to speak." Saying so, he kicked Luke Sun off the crane. Cat Nambi gave a sinister smile. If he falls face down, it would be even more embarrassing than when I was back then. Luke Sun muttered, "Cat Nambi, you bastard." But it's impossible to make him pay 5. He was a top-tier mastermind in his previous life. His moves on the ground are far from simple. Under the amazed gaze of the demonic sect disciples, Luke Sun easily landed and awkwardly struck a cool pose. Now, whether it was the female or male disciples of the demon sect, they all stared at Luke Sun with hearts in their eyes, shouting how handsome. Even the system couldn't help but worry. The male disciples' favorability increased faster than the female disciples. Luke Sun was directly stunned by this. At this moment, the leader of the Lu Dan sect cleared his throat a few times. All the disciples of the demonic sect finally reacted. Then everyone respectfully shouted in unison, "Greetings, junior uncle ancestor." Their voices, like rolling thunder, echoed through the clouds. Luke Sun searched the crowd for Gila's figure. He finally spotted her, desperately trying to see over the heads of the crowd. Luke smiled slightly at her. As a result, all the female disciples in that area blushed. Of course, only Jili knew that Luke Sun was smiling at her. The Peak Masters and Sect Masters stepped forward and said, "Greeting, Junior Uncle. Luke Sun." His scenery is truly sky-high. After completing the entire procedure, Luke Sun was about to begin his performance. Following this, under the watchful eyes of everyone, Luke Sun silently clicked to upgrade. Very quickly, the moment Luke Sun stepped onto the high platform, his strength surged in an instant. The Ludan Sect Master was shocked at the sight. You must know that the second level of the Food Kai art is even harder than the 10th level. This is because the second level requires enlightenment. The first level of the Food Kai art is to draw Kai into the body, and the second level of Kai technique requires understanding one's own sea of Kai. To break through to this level, one not only needs exceptional talent but also a mind as calm as still water. The Junior Grandmaster shows no fear in front of others. She even comprehends the Tao on the spot. It's simply, the peak was originally silent. In an instant, everything became lively. Then, from the bottom of their hearts, they all congratulated Luke Sun. Luke Sun's reputation skyrocketed in a moment. At the same time, they began to feel confused. How vast is the sea of energy that the little master uncle saw? How big could it be? Some people are narrow-minded. Perhaps one can only see something as small as a water jar. Some people's vision extends far. Looking at, perhaps they can see a trickling stream. But those with extraordinary talent see something different. He, as a sect master, sees a Tianxuan as vast as a river, unaware of everyone's curiosity. Luke Sun, standing on the high platform, was also puzzled at this moment. Why hadn't he seen anything? That man had actually been ambushed by his second senior sister and stabbed 365 times. After Luke Sun showed off so much at the Demon Sect celebration, countless Demon Sect disciples worshipped him immensely. Some female disciples couldn't even walk anymore, hoping to be noticed by Luke Sun, so he could cure their weak legs. Meanwhile, the sect master elders and disciples were all curious about how large Luke Sun's Kai Sea had become after breaking through the second layer of the Food Kai art. They wondered just how vast it was. Some enforcement elders and peak masters believed that it might be quite small. A broad-minded, beautiful peak master believes that Luke Sun is a genius. She believes his spiritual sea is definitely bigger than a river. Because of this, they even made a bet. They bet that their little senior uncle Luke Sun would see a vast spiritual sea. As for Luke Sun, he felt a bit strange. He felt like someone was watching him. But right now, Luke Sun is heading back to the small study with Mao Nambe. On the way back, Luke Sun asked why Mao Nambe kept looking at him. Mao Nambe, upon hearing this, said she would beat around the bush. She asked Luke Sun how vast the Sea of Kai was that he saw. How should I put it? Luke Sun really didn't see nothing at all. The moment he leveled up, he saw boundless darkness. It's pitch black. Nature is equivalent to nothingness. Isn't that the same as seeing nothing? So to Mao Nambe's question, Luke Sun couldn't give a proper answer. He simply didn't say anything. This made Mao Nambe very unhappy. Seeing this, Luke Sun turned his head to the side. He secretly thought to himself that he still needed some face. He said he saw nothing. Adding to his pitiful qualifications, he could be said to have lost all face. Seeing Luke Sun's pitiful appearance, Mao Nambe didn't press further. He also guessed that the key sea Luke Sun saw wasn't large. But it doesn't matter. Luke Sun is a person from our small bookstore. If anyone dares to bully Ludi, they'll see her cut them down with one stroke. Luke Sun couldn't help but sigh inwardly. Why does it feel just as miserable as in the previous life? In the previous life, he had no parents, no backing, didn't like forming cliques, and in the game, he would show off his skills everywhere, just to gain a sense of presence in front of others, then get more game orders. There aren't that many people who like to act impressive. It's just to attract attention, just to make themselves feel important. After all, I have a younger sister to support, but is there a possibility that my energy core is actually dark? The next day, in the small study Bamboo Grove, second senior sister also learned from Mao Nambe that Luke Sun's Danshan was very small. Second senior sister couldn't help but look at Luke Sun, wondering what he was thinking. At this time, Mao Nambe broke free from second senior sister's embrace and jumped onto Luke Sun's head. Mao Nambe told Luke Sun not to worry anymore, even if his Danshan was very small. If anyone dares to bully you, I'll cut off their head. Luke Sun was instantly moved after hearing this. Then he gave the fish from his plate to Mao Nambe. Mao Nambe was so happy after eating the fish. Seeing this, the second senior sister secretly made up her mind. She would also help her junior brother. Night fell. Luke Sun a nightmare. He woke up from the dream. His whole body was covered in cold sweat. He dreamt that someone was chasing him, but he couldn't see the person's face clearly. It was strange. Who could that figure be? After checking his reputation score, Luke Sun adjusted his emotion. He tried to continue sleeping, but the nightmare started again. The shadowy figure started chasing him again. This made Luke Sun shout, "What the hell? How is it that even a dream has a sequel?" Luke Sun pinched his face hard to wake himself up. Breathing heavily, he began questioning his life. Had he run into a ghost? However, Luxun really didn't believe in this kind of superstition. He thought he would be unable to sleep tonight. But after Luxun fell asleep, the figure still appeared. Luxun pinched himself awake again, then continued to fall back asleep. He didn't believe he could keep having the same dream, but unsurprisingly it happened. The figure chasing him appeared again. Luxun was completely numb, but Luxun wasn't a fool. There must be something fishy about this. So Luxun opened his system detection in his dream. The next moment, the system popped up showing his status as Sword Intent Entwined, and a task was triggered. Whether to accept Guxiamin's Sword Intent training. Luxun finally understood everything. He immediately chose to accept. With Luxun's decision to accept, second senior sister began her violent teaching. That night, Luxun experienced all kinds of death. He wasn't stabbed. He was on the way to being stabbed. In the end, Luxun even started to enjoy it a little. The next day, when Luxun woke up, he let out a long sigh. But he was still excited and wanted to do it a few more times. At this moment, Mao Nambe was in Luxun's room. She handed Luxun 2 dates and asked if he wanted to eat them. Luxun waved his hand indicating he didn't want any. It was because he had been poked all night. Although excited, he still felt a bit dizzy. But then Mao Nambe shoved the jujube into Luxun's mouth. He has to eat it, whether he likes it or not. This jube is good for Luxun. Eat 2 of them. Don't overeat. And indeed, as Mao Nambe said, after Luxun ate the jujubes, it makes him feel refreshed. The fatigue from being stabbed disappeared. At this moment, Mao Nambe grinned and said to Luxun, "You've been stabbed 365 times by second senior sister. It must not feel good, right?" Luxun was confused. How does Mao Nambe know? Mao Nambe boasted that she knew everything, and asked Luxun if he wanted to ask her. She would then ask her second senior sister to retract her sword intent. Actually, even if Mao Nambe begged it would be useless. The second senior sister wouldn't listen to Mao Nambe. Mao Nambe just wanted to see Luxun begging her. But Luxun laughed. He didn't beg Mao Nambe at all. Mao Nambe was puzzled. It's because Lu Tao only needs to endure being stabbed for 30 days to gain a boost in his swordsmanship qualifications. Has this man been possessed by the Medicine King? The food he made actually made the beautiful senior sister lose herself in ecstasy. After Luxun was stabbed 365 times by the second senior sister, he also woke. And today is also the day for cultivators' family visits. Some have their relatives visiting from the mountain. Without family, the demon sect is home. Luxun smiled faintly when he saw this. A cultivator is just a human with a longer lifespan. The threat of worldly fireworks is something that cannot be severed. This is also why so many players in the past life preferred to immerse themselves in this virtual world, full of fireworks and human warmth. Compared to the cold, harsh reality, illusion can sometimes be a form of tenderness. At the same time, in a tea house somewhere, a storyteller is passionately narrating his tale. The thrilling content is enough to make one's face flush with embarrassment. He was heard saying, "Zhang San ripped off Lisa's inner garment. Then she revealed her snow-white slender legs." At that moment it was hard to resist. At that instant she was about to. I bet you're dying to know what happens next, but this storyteller has cut off the chapter. If you want to know, just watch the next video. And this unresolved content is incredibly frustrating. As a result, people stopped giving him money. This caused his income to be 0 again. Why I say again? Because he cuts off chapters every day. However, storytelling is just a hobby for him. It doesn't matter whether he makes money or not. It could even be considered a perverse pleasure. His disciples behind him asked if he was sure he wouldn't return to the mountain. The gentleman asked if he was going back. The disciple replied that he was looking at the new junior disciple. It turned out that the storyteller was indeed Luxun's master. He shook his head and said he wasn't going back. What's so interesting about it? Aren't there just 2 eyes, 2 ears, a nose and a mouth? Besides, can anyone be as handsome as me? The disciple at the side curled his lips. He knew his master's temperament very well. Besides being vain, he's also jealous. Therefore, he doesn't like men who are handsome. That's why he was chosen as the sect leader. If the master knew that the newly recruited disciple is a handsome man, I wonder what he would think. However, what Mao Nambai said before was right. The master really came down the mountain to have fun. Sometimes he disrupts others' good things. He enjoys being chased by others. At this point, the master's third disciple curiously asked the master why he had set such a rule for accepting disciples. The master shook his fan and casually replied, "It was just a spontaneous thought when I stood on the Jian Peak that day. I said it without thinking." The third disciple didn't believe a word of his master's words. Full of curiosity, he was determined to study his little junior brother when they returned to the demon sect. Back in the small study in the bamboo forest, Luxun and Kat Nambe came to deliver food to the second senior sister. Luxun approached the second senior sister, cupped his hands and said, "Thank you for your guidance, second senior sister." After all, what happened last night made him feel quite comfortable. The second senior sister nodded slightly upon hearing this, remaining taciturn. Since Luxun realized that the aloof second senior sister was actually a stutterer. He didn't know why, but that stuttering aspect was quite endearing to him. So Luke-san pretended not to notice, and thanked the second senior sister again. This time the second senior sister's nod was more pronounced. She said listen slowly and heard it. It was clear she was trying to hide her stutter. Luke-san knew when to stop. He handed over the braised noodles he made today. The second senior sister looked at the noodles in her hand. A slight blush appeared on her cold face. It was because the noodles smelled so good. When the third senior sister elegantly slurped the noodles into her mouth, the second senior sister's beautiful eyes couldn't help but widen. This is simply too delicious. It made her legs, which had been sitting on the stone for a long time, feel a little weak. Soon the second senior sister began to eat eagerly. It was so adorable to watch. At that moment Luke-san suddenly froze, because he noticed that the wooden plank on the second senior sister's head was actually her sword. Luke-san looked at his second senior sister's wooden hairpin. His thoughts began to wander, and the more he thought, the more astray they went. Don't get me wrong. Luke-san was curious about just how strong his second senior sister really was. In the previous life's Tianxuan game, it only opened up to level 60. No player had ever seen his second senior sister make a move. Now it's just a hairpin used as a sword. It kept him awake all night. The sheets and blankets have been wet dozens of times, and Luke-san was very curious. When the second senior sister took off her hairpin, how beautiful would her hair flowing in the wind look? Afterwards, the two of them didn't stay in the bamboo forest for too long. After bidding farewell to the second senior sister, they returned to the small study. Along the way, they played around with Cat Nambi. Luke-san was so tired gasping for breath, he shouted, "I can't do it anymore." Manambe chuckled and said, "Don't men forbid themselves from saying they can't do it? You're already unable to continue after such a short time. Come on, keep going, don't stop, Luke-san." Does Mao Nambe really know what she's saying? After Mao Nambe finished speaking, she continued to let Luke-san chase her. But suddenly Mao Nambe bumped into a wall of people. The person who arrived was the Ludan sect master. His purpose, of course, was to find Luke-san. He mainly wanted to indirectly inquire. When Luke-san was breaking through the second level of the Shiki Zhu, exactly how many Kisis did he see? He even took out a pile of spirit stones for Luke-san. After all, he's a bet with several peak masters. Everyone bet quite heavily. He's still hoping to make a profit. Of course, Luke-san refused. This left the Ludan sect master quite embarrassed. But this time, Luke-san, the Ludan sect master also has his reason. Seeing he couldn't get an answer, the braised egg sect master asked Luke-san whether he was interested in participating in the trials organized by the outer sect elders for the outer sect disciples. Luke-san was curious. Could he, with his current strength, even participate? The braised egg sect master said that the content of this trial was quite simple. It was just painting. Meanwhile, a system prompt popped up. The task is to practice drawing for 5 minutes. You can earn 5,000 experience points. Seeing 5,000 experience points, Luke's eyes lit up. Without thinking, he agreed immediately. You are gazing into the abyss. The abyss is also gazing into you. Just by taking a glance, the sword energy could kill you. After accepting the trial task in Luxina, he was initially overwhelmed by the experience, but then calmed down. Although 5,000 experience is a lot, Alexine couldn't help but think about how he suffers through painful training every night, just to get 20 experience points. Now he could just draw and get 5,000 experience. Could this really be true? So he asked Master Luke, "Is it really that simple, just drawing?" The stewed egg master rubbed his hands and replied, "The painting used Sir's brush." Luke-san finally understood, but at least there's no danger to life. Then the master of the stewed egg took Luke-san to the training grounds. He was also looking forward to seeing Geely again. After all, it's been a long time since he bullied her. When passing by the Jian Peak, Luke-san paused for a moment. It was here that he had lost his first life. The Ludan sect master noticed and asked curiously, "Junior uncle, do you find Jian Peak to be somewhat unusual?" As he spoke, his eyes narrowed, and his small eyes opened wide. "Junior uncle, do you know who did this?" Luke-san was shocked. It was actually done by a person. The braised egg sect master gave an affirmative answer. That single sword strike from back then resulted in its current state. Luke-san guessed it was the mister who did it. The braised egg sect master slightly shook his head, indicating it wasn't him. It was the founder of the demon sect who struck it. He was the mister's eldest disciple, and also my master. As a result, Luke-san's focus was unexpectedly surprising. What he's focused on is that the demon sect has only passed down 2 generations so far. The Ludan sect leader coughed a few times. He drew Luke-san's attention back, then he said loudly, "That's not the point. The point is that my master's sword can slay mountains, unbeatable under heaven. What little cutie Wanjin Mountain, Sword Mountain, as long as my master is here, they could never be the top swordsman." Luke-san was a little surprised. So that means his senior brother is the #1 swordsman in the world. Luke-san was about to ask where his senior brother was, but the bald-headed sect master informed him that he was in secluded cultivation. Luke-san was puzzled. He didn't remember this setting from his past life's game. The bald-headed sect master said, "His master is seeking a breakthrough. If there is no breakthrough, he will never appear in the world again." The meaning of closed-door meditation is that either he dies or breaks through. What's most infuriating is the scum of Jian Mountain and Yijian Mountain. They keep testing whether the master is still alive. They are so obsessed with the false title of the #1 swordsmanship. At this moment, Luxun curiously asked. The Grand Senior Brother was the first sect leader of the demon sect. And what about this Mr.? The leader of the egg sect replied. The Mr. is a solitary cultivator, not someone from the demon sect. Luxun now understood. So that's why he said the demon sect's actions weren't demonic at all. The leader of the egg sect was furious inside. Why does my junior always focus on different things? The Lord of Ludan sect, in order to make Luxun think his master is impressive, pointed towards the Jian Peak and introduced it. Back then his master cleaved a mountain, leaving behind a half-formed sword kai which many sword cultivators still come to observe. Luxun was moved upon hearing this. Since others can come to observe and learn, I wonder if I can do the same. He asked the sect master if he could go take a look at the sword kai left by his senior brother. The sect master of Ludan said it was fine, but he could only look for a moment. He couldn't stare for too long. This let Luxun puzzled. It turns out that when you gaze at the sword kia, the sword energy is also watching you, and when the sword energy glances at you, you will die. Luxun heard this and wasn't afraid. He still has a resurrection coin. If he gains some insight, he'll make a big profit. After a while, the Lord of the Ludan sect asked if Luxun still wanted to watch. Luxun nodded confidently. The Ludan sect master said no more. His two fingers joined together, resembling a sword made of fingers. Then he swept them across Luxun's eyes. In an instant, Luxun's vision went black. He found himself in an unknown place. He noticed a crack ahead. Could the sword energy be inside it? Luxun's eyes wide. He found it hard to describe the scene. If he had to summarize it, it was a sword that opened the heavens and created the earth. What surprised him most was, in just that instant, he saw the sword energy, and the sword energy saw him. Then the sword energy turned around and ran away. Luxun looked on with a face full of question marks. What the heck was that? Didn't they say that just a glance from the sword energy would kill you? Then a large hand reached out towards Luxun. He was pulled back by the Ludan sect master. The Ludan sect master seemed to have expended quite a bit of energy. He intermittently asked if Luxun had made any progress. Luxun was still immersed in the confusion from earlier. He was only supposed to take a quick glance. Why is this sword energy playing hide-and-seek now? Isn't this like when you gaze into the abyss, and the abyss gets shy? At this moment, the system prompt sounded. Congratulations, host, you've gained a great opportunity. Swordsmanship Aptitude 1. Luxun was surprised. He just took a glance and didn't do anything. Yet he gained a special attribute point. Strange waves surged into Luxun's forehead. Terrifying fluctuation began to form around Luxun. Even the Eggmaster was shocked by this scene. The little martial uncle has actually comprehended swordsmanship. Could it be that junior uncle is a swordsmanship genius, or is he the legendary natural-born sword embryo? At this moment, the commotion caused by Luxun was a bit too much. The fluctuations on his body became more and more dazzling. In an instant, a golden wave spread out from him in all directions. This spread covered dozens of miles. The next moment, a celestial phenomenon appeared. Immediately, all the disciples of the demon sect's swords began to tremble, producing a loud resonant sound. This left Jila confused, not understanding what was happening. However, the direction of the anomaly pointed to the back mountain where Luxun was. This made Jila worry about Luxun. But in the next moment, Jila realized her worries were unnecessary. In fact, all the demon sect disciples were cheering Luxun's name. It was because the hearty laughter of the sect master of the Ludan sect had spread throughout the demon sect. Congratulations to junior uncle on his enlightenment of the sword heart. Man flirts with girls 520 times a day. The girls in this demon sect are either flirted with by him, or on their way to being flirted with by him. Even the beautiful female elder of this demon sect is no exception. She directly calls him the #1 person in all eternity. After all, Luxun, whose looks are already maxed out, coupled with the celestial phenomenon of his awakened sword heart this time, this allowed Luxun to gain immense prestige and reputation in the demon sect. This also allowed Luxun to directly complete his previous reputation task. Is completed perfectly. Besides gaining 10,000 experience points, Luxun also obtained a special attribute point. This is a great treasure. You should know that the previous swordsmanship aptitude points were what we call special attribute points. This is the sect master of Ludan asking if Luxun still wants to go for the outer sect trial. Luxun replied, of course, he still wants to give it a try. Actually, it's just that Luxun wants to take on a mission. After all, it's 5,000 experience. A moment later, Luxun and the others arrived at the outer sect trial grounds. The outer disciples bowed to them one after another. Luxun smiled and nodded, his expression warm and approachable. He strived to leave a good impression on the heart of every tool, every junior. So he continued to farm reputation points later. Sure enough, the demon sect disciples fell for Luxun's charm. Some male disciples even wished they were female, so they could bear Luxun's children. At this point, the trial was about to begin. The Egg Lord instructed the elders to go elsewhere and drink tea while watching. Drink tea. Luke's son suddenly heard someone calling him. He saw a person desperately standing on tiptoe in the crowd and continuously waving at Luke's son. Luke's son found this scene rather amusing. He then waved back at Ji Li. Let her come over. Ji Li's face turned red upon seeing this. However, Ji Li still mustered the courage to squeeze through the crowd and approached Luke. This caused many female disciples to secretly admire her. Seeing Ji Li's awkward appearance, Luke's son felt a mischievous urge to tease her, so he spoke up. You even wanted to use me as a furnace before. Now you ought to be shy. Saying this, he took a step forward. His large hand gently caressed Ji Li's small head and asked, Do you still have the thought of using me as a furnace? Ji Li said she didn't dare. But how could Luke's son not see through her, saying she didn't dare? But it's already written all over your face that you're eager to try. You little stinker. I treat you as a junior. But you're lusting after my body. At this time, the beautiful elder who is hosting the trial arrived. She asked Luke's son if he wanted to be the first to go on stage or watch first. Luke smiled slightly, indicating, let him be the first to go. He'll set an example for everyone. This way he won't feel nervous watching everyone from the side. Immediately the disciples of the demon sect cheered. They thought their little junior uncle was so considerate and approachable. Luke's son was very pleased with this. An idea began to form in his mind. He wants to be the idol of the demon sect disciples. To be their topics on needs clarification, likely a slang term. To become a top-tier figure in the demon sect soon. Then his reputation will skyrocket. As the trial begins, on the table there's only a seemingly ordinary brush and a huge sheet of self-colored talisman paper. It's currently floating in midair. He glanced at the system prompt. The talisman paper has nothing special about it. The focus of the test is his pen. Sure enough, the system showed that this pen was a cheap, ordinary pen the gentleman had used casually, but its level had reached 20, and it also had spiritual resonance. This left Luke's son very surprised. One pen and he's already level 20. You know he's only level 2, right? Just how strong is this master we've never even met? At this time, the beautiful elder presiding announced the rules of the test. Just pick up a pen and draw anything on the drawing paper. The person who holds the pen and draws for the longest time will be rewarded with a green jade pill. This caused the outer sect disciples to cheer. A single emerald pill is worth months of cultivation. Luke's son is also cheering for Ji Li, who is about to take the stage. Ji Li nods earnestly. The test begins. Luke's son reaches for the brush. To his surprise, it feels very light. Is this it? Just as Luke's son thought it was easy, when the brush dipped in ink, the cow came rushing in. The brush instantly became as heavy as 1,000 pounds. Luke's son veins immediately started popping. He didn't believe that his years of training his Kulin arm couldn't lift it. In the next moment, Luke's son began trying to draw on the little spiritual power he had left inside. Although I feel a little tired, I must appear calm and composed. After all, I'm their senior brother now. I have an idol's image to maintain. Absolutely cannot lose face in front of the Iran boys. The disciples watching from behind saw their junior uncle's right hand trembling, but his expression remained calm. One could say he remained unfazed. One can't help but feel admiration. Even the lazy sect master who just drinks tea and eats melon seeds is extremely satisfied. He believes the little martial uncle's temperament is truly admirable. This man actually wants to become the top figure in the immortal cultivation world. He aims to introduce fan culture to the cultivation world, to become the idol of cultivators, to become their son. Now the first step begins with the demon sect, so this time he must hold on. Leave a perfect image for the disciples of the demon sect. But just as the tip of the pen was about to touch the talisman paper, time seemed to freeze. From an outsider's perspective, the little master uncle seemed frozen. They thought their little master uncle was trying to draw something that would shock the heavens and make the ghosts weep. But actually that's not the case. Luke's son also wanted to write with the ease of flowing water, his brushstrokes unrestrained. But the brush wouldn't move. Luke's son gritted his teeth. He once again channeled his spiritual energy. But it still wouldn't budge. At this time, the beautiful female host elder beside him reminded the disciples. Look closely. The beginning of the trial is the moment when this pen touches the paper. This pen already has a spirit, wanting to control it. But it's not something that can be done with brute force alone. Luke's son, who was standing by, felt a stir in his heart. If force doesn't work, then try something gentle. With Lun's constant urging in his mind, shouting, baby, move a little. Seems like I heard Luke's son calling out. The pen in his hand moved. It really can't be forced. It needs to be soft. Luke's son immediately understood. This trial is testing the disciples of the demon sect's control over their internal spiritual energy. It's not about brute force, but meticulous detail. Even the elders, leisurely sipping tea and eating melon seeds, were somewhat surprised. They didn't expect the little junior uncle to grasp it so quickly. At this moment, Luke's son felt a little strange, because he had never trained in controlling spiritual energy. How did it feel increasingly more handy? Suddenly, Luke's son's expression relaxed. He thought of the painful lashings from second senior sister's love. It was sword-intent training. Luke's son gritted his teeth and continued painting. He couldn't let down second senior sister's training. Time passed by second. The two beautiful elders from the demon sect understood that Luxun's cultivation was still shallow. His spiritual energy would likely run out soon. But in the next moment, whether it was the leader of the demon sect, or the beautiful elder, or even the disciples of the demon sect, none of them were not showing signs of shock. This because after Luxun completed the system task prompt, Luxun was unwilling to settle for only 20% progress. He was a rather greedy person. If you're going to take it all. So Luxun directly chose to upgrade. This surprised everyone in the demon sect. He's actually multitasking, drawing while breaking through. The next moment, in everyone's astonished gaze, Luxun used the pen in his hand to draw a straight line on the talisman paper. The weight of the pen felt like 1,000 pounds. Drawing a straight line with it was understandably difficult. Luxun smiled. Let's see what his limit is. Thus Luxun frantically started drawing on the paper. He was still thinking about whether to draw a dragon on the left and a rainbow on the right. Time slowly passed, an hour went by. Luxun is still painting. This caused everyone present to shout monster. And the scariest part is that he broke through 2 realms in a row. In the end, his brush strokes were bold and free, flowing like dragons and snakes. Luxun wrote 4 characters on the paper. Roll, die. Of course, the cultivators in this world couldn't understand simplified Chinese. Facing Luxun's painting, they all cheered and shouted. He's also exuded a sense of artistic conception. This makes Luxun's journey to becoming an idol longer and longer. I believe that soon there will be many more Xun fans. But Luxun, with his back to the crowd, isn't actually doing so well, because his mental energy is greatly depleted. He's even wobbling as he walks. Luxun can only endure it. Otherwise, his dream of becoming a top idol hasn't even begun. It was already over. Jili and the beautiful elder beside him both noticed Luxun's weakness. Jili was even worried that if Luxun fell, he would fall and hurt his face. She was considering whether to help him up. At this moment, Luxun reached into his bosom and took out a juju. After eating it, he felt a refreshing coolness throughout his body. The dizziness has improved a little. The mana's also recovered a bit. This has greatly relieved Luxun's condition. Then with a beaming face, he turned to the disciples and said, "It's your turn to go on stage now." This left the beautiful elder a bit surprised. Did she misjudge it earlier? Jili shouted in her heart, "That's great. My face won't hit the ground." Luxun Jili's expression very strange. What's this stinky girl thinking about? The test continued. It was Jili's turn next. Jili walked over slowly. She gently exhaled. She had already decided what to do. She wanted to be the woman who completely enveloped Luxun. The next moment, Luxun, who had been maintaining his idle pose, his eyes began to twitch uncontrollably. After drawing for 15 minutes, Jili drew a circle that somewhat resembled a heart shape, enveloping Luxun's drawing. This damn possessiveness, Jili giggled foolishly. She even looks a little smug, but after holding on for 15 minutes, she's already too weak to continue and slowly falls backward. The girl bites his finger every day. She's just craving the body of the man in front of her. Using exhaustion from depleting her spiritual energy as an excuse, she conveniently leans into the arms of the man she loves, facing the jube he offers her. Aside from being so sweet, they also want to have intimate contact with him. This made Luda's face flush with embarrassment. The elders of the sect who were watching also blushed a little. They couldn't help but sigh. The youngsters really know how to have fun. Just because of a simple outer sect test, everyone was pushing their physical limits. If you don't faint, don't stop. I've completely been led astray by Luxun and Jili. But the results of this test have come out. The first place in the test is Jili. This left Jili a bit confused for a moment. Luke smiled and asked her in return, "As your little granduncle, how could I steal your junior's reward?" When those words were said, all the disciples' admiration for him was through the roof. They thought Luxun's vision was too grand. Luxun looked at the increase in his reputation. He smiled in satisfaction. This approach was spot on. Luxun looked at Jili beside him and couldn't help but want to tease her. He then asked, "How will you thank me?" This left Jili feeling shy. Obviously, she misunderstood. Because while they were gossiping, they started a bet. This time, he was the winner. He looked at Jili's figure with great satisfaction. As expected, she is the disciple I chose. Suddenly, the lord of the Lu Dan sect noticed. He realized something was wrong. They were probably all thinking of taking Jili as their disciple. With his reputation for being so stingy, he has no competitiveness at all. He needs to come up with a strategy. Soon he had an idea. It was to take advantage of what happened during the cliff jumping incident with Luxun. After all, everyone had sensed an invisible pressure that day. The head of the Lu Dan sect said that, just in case, they should investigate the matter thoroughly. This made the sect elders nod in agreement. We must get to the bottom of this. If there's malicious intent, the situation could escalate further. Sect Master Lu Dan saw that their attention was completely diverted. He couldn't help but feel smug. This little girl is his personally chosen disciple. No one can take her away. In fact, Sect Master Lu Dan had already, I've guessed the source of that power. After all, it was at Jian Peak, and the sword energy at Jian Peak wasn't erupting at the time, so it's very likely that it was done by his master Luxun's senior brother. Night falls. Inside Lu's, He looked at his panel. He still had over 10,000 experience points left. I can't help but sigh. Money flows like water. While feeling exhausted, Luxin also decided to save some money. He still needed to upgrade his skills, and the tired Luxin soon fell into a deep sleep. The next moment, the second senior sister's love-infused whipping began again. After a night of hard work, it was gone in a flash. I can't really explain it, and it felt very fast. It was just a matter of seconds. Cat Nambe listened and said with a look of disdain, "You're really fast?" Then he said with a slight smile, "You have already comprehended the sword heart. He doesn't even have a sword." Luxin glanced at Mount Ambi upon hearing this. Then he bowed to Mount Ambi and said, "Thank you, fourth senior sister, for granting me a sword." Mount Ambi immediately got upset. She turned around, her little bottom swaying as she made a sound. She no longer wanted to pay attention to Luke's son. Suddenly a system prompt sounded. It's actually an internal testing player about to arrive. This made Luke's son become serious. At the same time, he was also looking forward to it. Hojing's silly players are very useful tools. Mount Ambe then jumped onto Luke's son's head, telling him not to grin like a fool. Hurry up and cook and send it to second senior sister. She wants to eat pumpkin porridge. But the players are coming soon. This level is too low. I need to quickly level up. He then bid farewell to his second senior sister. He'll bring lunch later. Hearing this, the second senior sister stammered, "I understand." Seeing this, Luke's son smiled happily. This is all thanks to his hard work. You should know that before, senior sister wouldn't even talk to him, and Luke's son didn't rush to leave. Instead, he asked them if they wanted anything to eat tomorrow, since it would be the Mid-Autumn Festival. "Is there anything you'd like to eat?" When Mount Ambe heard this, she was no longer sleepy. She immediately started ordering dishes for Luke's son. Luke's son smiled and agreed to each of them. "It's a holiday, so we have a big meal." Then they left satisfied. Luke suddenly arrived in such a familiar yet strange world. At least he's not alone anymore. This orange cat gets to cuddle with his beautiful senior sister every day. But he also gets his little head smacked down by his beautiful senior sister every day, because he's too mischievous. Jing proposed to get a sword for the junior apprentice. She planned to take the idea from someone else's sword, so the beautiful senior sister told her not to be reckless, and asked her to pass on her sword nurturing technique to Luke's son. Mount Ambe, upon hearing this, looked confused and directly said, "Your junior apprentice's body is already being drained by you. Can he handle this sword nurturing technique?" After all, this method was created by the eldest senior brother. The beautiful senior sister nodded firmly. Meanwhile, inside another room, Luxin was sitting cross-legged in cultivation. Suddenly, with a whoosh, the door burst open. Luke's son was directly pressed to the ground. Just as Luke's son thought he was about to be forced and his chastity violated, Nambe, having transformed back into a cat, told him to be quiet. Then he closed his eyes and calmed his mind. Immediately, Mount Nambe raised 2 fingers in front of him. A crisp sound followed. As Luke's son was confused about the situation, a message surged into his mind. The system prompt sounded immediately after. "Do you wish to learn the skill sword cultivation? The skill level is orange." As for Mount Nambe's knife cultivation skill, it's actually a modified version of swordsmanship. Luxin was stunned, because skill levels like equipment are divided into gray, yellow, blue, purple, and orange. Orange is the highest level skill. He had never encountered this in his previous life. What's there to hesitate about? Luxin directly chose to learn it. The next moment, the swordsmanship training was successfully learned. The progress is at level 0. Luxin looked at it and exclaimed, "Well, I'll be damned." Learning this actually cost 10,000 experience points. Now upgrading requires another 1,500. Luxin gritted his teeth and clicked to upgrade. He had no choice but to upgrade. He had already spent 10,000 experience points. The mutation happened at this very moment. The surrounding spiritual energy started to go crazy, converging towards Luxin. Mount Nambe was shocked at the sight. He had learned the sword nurturing technique in just a few breaths of time. Could my junior brother's aptitude really be only average? At the same time, Mount Nambe panicked, because the sword nurturing technique requires a sword to nurture. Only a sword that has been nurtured can unleash unparalleled power. But the problem is, right now, junior brother doesn't even have a sword. At this moment, Luxin's body started showing unusual signs. Because there was no sword, the gathered spiritual energy was swirling around his body. There was no outlet for it. This caused intense pain for Luke's son. Right now, Luke's son felt as though his veins had been drained of all their blood. The pain surged like molten lava. But all the experience points have been spent. It must be possible to level up. Then the spiritual energy seemed to be drawn by something. It began to gather towards the heart inside Luke's son's body. Gradually, a solid golden light appeared in his heart. Under Luxin's surprised inner vision, a very fine silver needle appeared at the center of his heart. But in reality, this is an extremely small sword, a sword in the heart. After everything calmed down, Luke Sun opened his eyes, but he found that Cat Nambai was right next to him. This almost gave Luke Sun a heart attack. Cat Nambai didn't care about that. He pounced on Luke Sun and started all over him, worriedly asking if Luke Sun is alright. Does he feel anything wrong with his body? The next moment, Mao Nambai knew her worry was unfounded, because Luke Sun said nothing's wrong. Maybe I've become even more handsome. Mao Nambai snorted and jumped off Luke Sun. Seems like he's fine. You're really lucky to be alive. Your reckless cultivation attempt just now must have failed. It's fortunate you didn't suffer backlash. Let me tell you, sword nurturing technique is a top-tier art requiring gradual comprehension. Before you fully grasp it, remember not to practice it, otherwise you'll go mad, and your body will explode. Luke Sun awkwardly chuckled. Seeing this, Mao Nambai seriously told Luke Sun not to take it lightly. Without a natal treasure, even if you train, you won't achieve any results. Luke Sun sensed something was wrong. A natal treasure is required. Then how did he cultivate a sword in his heart? However, Mao Nambai was still very worried about Luke Sun's body. He pulled Luke Sun and decided to have the second senior sister check him. Luke Sun sat cross-legged in front of the second senior sister, accepting a physical examination from the second senior sister. The second senior sister had already found what Mao Nambai said, a little hard to believe. But what's going on now? Why can a human body be used to nurture a sword? Unless, Mao Nambai curiously asked from the side, did Luke Sun really develop a problem? The second senior sister shook her head, indicating it wasn't so. Then with a serious expression, she stammered, It's an innate sword wum. Mao Nambai was shocked. Luke Sun was puzzled. What is an innate sword wum? Mao Nambai explained. The founding ancestor of Sword Mountain was an innate sword wum. Our senior brother is also speculated to be a natural sword fetus. As long as someone is a natural sword fetus, their swordsmanship is definitely not mediocre. After hearing this, Luke Sun's face showed surprise, and inside his mind was spinning wildly. He has a handsome natural sword fetus. His swordsmanship talent is only 1 point. A true now sword fetus? I guess his swordsmanship aptitude is 10 points. But although he wasn't born with a sword heart, while others practiced sword techniques, he cultivated his mind. He directly cultivated a heart sword within his heart, making himself into someone born with a sword heart. But why can't he, someone born with a sword heart, hold a sword? It turns out that after his beautiful senior sister learned that Luke Sun was born with a sword heart, let Mao Nambai go to the demon sex weapon refining peak to find a main sword. He will bring it back for Luke Sun to test. Mao Nambai immediately agreed upon hearing this. Luke Sun saw that Mao Nambai was going to get a weapon for him, so he couldn't help but remind him a few things. He then shouted at the transformed orange cat Mao Nambai, make sure to get him a high-quality one. Mao Nambai was quite speechless upon hearing this. This little junior really passes by like he's stepping on dung, and has to try a bit of everything to see what's salty and what's not. He has to take advantage of it. Luke Sun doesn't care about what Mao Nambai is thinking. He is already looking forward to having his own sword. Soon after Mao Nambai returned, he came back with more than one sword on his back. It's clear that Nambai really loves Luke Sun. That's true. Mao Nambai threw the 2 swords behind him at Luke Sun. This throw of Mao Nambai's wasn't just any ordinary throw. If Luke Sun tried to catch them, he'd probably be stabbed to death. But if he couldn't catch them, wouldn't he be incredibly embarrassed? Just as Luke Sun was about to handle the 2 swords, a delicate hand reached out. The 2 swords instantly froze in front of Luke Sun. The voice of the second senior sister followed immediately. Stop messing around. With a single command from the second senior sister, Mao Nambai immediately felt a bit awkward. He realized he'd gone too far. The second senior sister intermittently gave a lesson to the one in charge. The general meaning was that Mao Nambai, as the senior sister, should take good care of her little junior brother. Mao Nambai was scolded to tears. Luke Sun moved to tears. The second senior sister is truly so charming. Then the second senior sister slightly turned her head and looked at Luke Sun, telling him to try the sword. Luke Sun responded with a sound. Both of them are Hongwu. The one called Bazi Emperor Red is of high quality. The one called Black Ruler is of medium quality. Luke Sun couldn't help but scoff inwardly. Shouldn't it be the flashy ones that are lower quality? Why is it not following the usual pattern? Then let's start with the lower quality ones. After Luke Sun grasped the Black Ruler, he felt like there wasn't anything wrong. But the next moment, the small sword within his Jiangxin trembled. Then an invisible force emanated from his palm, directly sending the Black Ruler flying. Luke Sun was stunned. He blankly looked at his own hand. It seems like the little sword in my heart is resisting that Black Ruler. So Luke Sun decided to try another sword. When Luke Sun grasped the sword with the rather cheesy name Bazi Emperor Red, the same thing happened again. The sword was once again knocked away. Luke Sun couldn't help but touch his chest. He vaguely felt the little sword within the sword's heart. It seemed like it was jealous. The cat Nambai standing beside them was also stunned. What is going on with this fork? At this moment, the second senior sister arrived behind Luke Sun. She took off her wooden hairpin and said, Try holding my sword. The wooden hairpin transformed into a sword and flew in front of Luke Sun. However, Luke Sun couldn't obtain any basic information about this wooden sword. He could only tell that the sword's rank was very high. The height is beyond what he can currently access. This made Luxun feel a bit nervous. The moment Luxun gripped the wooden sword, the small sword in his sword heart began to react violently. Its reaction was more intense than the previous two swords. It was far more violent. But this time, it wasn't the wooden sword that was sent flying. It was Luxun himself who was thrown out. After Luxun experienced a rocket launch landing, he was completely speechless. He really could handle it at all. The second senior sister's sword couldn't shake him. It just directly sent him flying, right? Isn't this essentially solving the problem? By eliminating the person who raised the problem. But now there's a very serious issue. The problem was placed in front of Luxun. That was his hands. It seemed like he would never be able to hold a sword again. Suddenly Luxun thought of a solution. Should I try using my feet? After all, wasn't there a pirate who fought with his feet? Isn't that pretty amazing? Mao Nambe was so amused by Luxun's idea that he laughed. Make Luxun act more normal. Then she sized Luxun up and down. How could a perfectly fine, naturally born sword body not be able to hold a sword? Luxun, feeling a bit down, replied, maybe he's just not cut out for it. Upon hearing this, Mao Nambe realized she had said the wrong thing. She quickly comforted Luxun, saying it's okay. It's fine, just wait for the master to return. He will definitely find a way. The master is capable of anything. When I was still just a little orange cat, he was able to make me transform. The master, except for not liking men who are too handsome, is very gentle with everyone. Speaking of this, Cat Nambai suddenly couldn't continue. Luxun is the good-looking man, right? This is... While others practice swordsmanship, he practices the heart. He directly forged a sword in his heart. He turned himself into a natural sword fetus. But as a result, his hands couldn't hold a sword. It's because his natural sword fetus gets jealous. He's not allowed to touch any other sword. Luxun's whole body went numb. At this moment, the third senior sister suggested having a match. Luxun quickly understood the second senior sister's intention upon hearing this. I'll fight in the next match. Let's see what effect the small sword inside the sword has. Mao Nambi immediately became eager to try. It was clear that she wanted to bully Luxun. Senior sister 2 knows this little cat very well. She directly shook her head and refused. She told GNC that he should find an outer disciple. Mao Nambe could only obediently listen. Then he flew towards the outer gate to bring back an outer disciple who practices swordsmanship. This person is none other than the adorable Ju. Ji Ligwon looked at Luxun inquiringly, asking if anything was wrong. Lux nodded and said yes. That is, draw your sword, then stab him hard. Upon hearing this, Ji Li immediately stepped forward and touched Luxun's head. She asked Luxun with concern, are you alright? Luxun, somewhat amused and exasperated, pulled Ji Li's hand away. His face serious, he said, I'm fine. Stab me quick. Seeing this, Ji Li took a step back. Then, obediently drawing her sword, she said to Luxun, be careful. I'll be using my full strength. Luxun said, no problem. Go ahead and stab me with all your might. Ji Li let out a soft shout. Holding the wedding dress sword, she quickly lunged at Luxun. However, just as they were about to reach Luxun, an unexpected change suddenly occurred. Ji Li's wedding dress sword seemed to be blocked by something. In the next moment, Ji Li was directly knocked away. Mao Nambe quickly caught Ji Li. After this experiment, Luxun probably understood the special function of this small sword in his body. It resists any sword that comes into contact with him. Wouldn't that mean he can activate the swordless domain anytime, anywhere? Cat Nambe couldn't help but comment. Born with a sword body but unable to use a sword, what good is that? After hearing this, Luda felt it made a lot of sense. He can't just open a swordless domain and get into close combat with others, can he? That wouldn't fit his identity as a magic sect idol. After all, swordplay and fist fighting, it's all about making the sword look cooler. Is there no way to be cool without needing a sword? Luxun couldn't help but think of the 6 meridian swordsmanship from a certain martial arts novel. He tried to channel the small sword inside his body. The next moment, a tiny sword kai really appeared at his fingertip. Luxun looked at the sword kai at his fingertip. Not wanting to admit it, he thought to himself, am I really becoming a swordsman? The other 3 looked at him equally surprised. It really is sword energy. But what's the use of such a short sword energy? It's not as useful as a long, sturdy sword. Manambi clearly disapproved. Luxun arrayed. But at that moment the second senior sister spoke. She sensed that Luxun's sword energy was extraordinary. She casually picked up a piece of wood and split it into countless pieces. Under Ji Li's surprised gaze, the second senior sister carved all the small pieces into hairpins. It's done. Seeing this, Mao Nambai stood by, preparing. If Ludi can't catch it, she can ensure that Luxun won't get hurt. In the next moment, countless wooden hairpins shot toward Luxun. Luxun, however, had a smile on his lips. To him this was nothing. In his life, he was someone who could manipulate his body with extreme precision. Luxun used his tiny sword energy. He sliced all the flying hairpins to pieces. Not a single hair on him was harmed. After it was all over, Luxun looked at the sword energy between his fingers, extremely satisfied. Although it's very short now, but the power is great. This is what they call small but mighty, right? His second senior sister and the others were somewhat helpless towards Luxun's self-admiration. But I have to say Luke Sun's potential for growth is enormous. By the time all the sword cultivators will be in front of him, and they won't even have the qualification to draw their swords. Centered around him, it will be like a swordless domain. And in this domain there can only be one sword. That sword is himself. At this moment, Luke Sun's body is drained. His mana is almost gone. And something Geely had been worried about happened. That is Luke Sun fell. Landing face first. On the way back to the small bookstore that night, Luke Sun. At the same time he went bald. He really got screwed. He'd rather sleep in the bamboo forest. I didn't want to be carried back like this. After Mao Nanbei took care of Luke Sun, she, intending to leave, suddenly changed her expression. She quickly walked towards the door, shouting "Sao Hai." As she reached out to pet the little black cat in front of her, the little black cat slowly disappeared. Mao Nanbei's pupils constricted violently. Then she knelt on the ground, muttering, "Was it all an illusion?" Looking at the full moon in the sky. Time flashed. It's Mid-Autumn Festival again. It's the day for family reunion again. But where's my family? Time came the next day. Looking at the cat outside the house, Nanbei, Luke Sun greeted him. Mao Nanbei replied with a listless morning. Luke Sun sensed something was wrong with the tone. He sat down beside Mao Nanbei and asked what was wrong. Mao Nanbei tugged at her ears inside. She asked Luke Sun, "Do you know why I was in Weiqing at that time?" Luke nodded slightly. "It's to exterminate those 100 ghosts, right? Then do you know why I kill those ghosts and monsters?" Luke Sun said he didn't know. Just as he was thinking, he heard Mao Nanbei say it was for revenge. It turned out that Mao Nanbei was a cat demon from the outskirts of Wei City. She was picked up by the master when she had just transformed, and her old home, it was in the Wildcat Mountain outside Weiqing. There were her relatives and companions before she became a demon, but her home was destroyed. It was destroyed by a mountain demon who had advanced to become a ghost king. Afterward, Cat Nanbei fought the ghost king. Although she killed the ghost king, his body was torn into countless pieces and turned into 100 ghosts. It was then that she met Luke Sun and the others. Luke Sun understood it as well. Today is the Mid-Autumn Festival. This little cat seems to miss home. Looking at the cat wandering aimlessly, Luke Sun couldn't help but think of his sister. His sister had once been wronged at school. She was just like this. He wondered if he would ever see her again. This is no ordinary pudding. As long as you eat it, you will experience unimaginable joy. Perhaps it's because the scene brings back memories. Or maybe Luke Sun has come to see Mao Nanbei as his sister. He grabbed Mao Nanbei's hand tightly, pulling her along with him. He can help her find her happiness again. Soon Luke Sun took Mao Nanbei to the kitchen. He asked Mao Nanbei to wait for a moment. Then Luke Sun took out rock candy, eggs, and milk. He started preparing them on his own. Mao Nanbei watched Luke Sun busying himself. A warm feeling filled his heart. At the same time, he couldn't help but laugh and call Luke Sun a fool in his heart. How silly to be trying to find happiness like that. What Mao Nanbei didn't know was that in his past life, Luke Sun's family was poor. When his sister was unhappy, he would also make this for her. Moments later, Luke Sun turned to Mao Nanbei and asked him to chill it. Hearing this, Mao Nanbei channeled his magic power towards the bowl in Luke Sun's hand. After it was chilled, Luke Sun took out a plate and placed the bowl on top. He said to Mao Nanbei, "The time to witness the miracle has come." When Luke Sun opened it, those who had seen it before would know it was a pudding. Those who hadn't, like Mao Nanbei, didn't know. She looked at it in confusion for a moment, then slowly took a small spoonful to taste. In the next instant, Mao Nanbei's eyes lit up. Immediately, she quickly took another large bite. Then she ate faster and faster. Her expression was simply adorable. Just as she was about to finish, she realized Luke Sun hadn't eaten a single bite. She then asked Luke Sun if he wanted some. Luke Sun shook his head slightly and said with a slightly doting tone, "It's fine, I'll give it to you. If you want to eat it again later, I'll make it for you." At that moment, Cat Nanbei lowered its little head, quickly finishing the pudding on the plate. From this angle, Luke Sun looked down. He suddenly had the urge to pet the cat, but just as he reached out halfway, he froze in mid-air. He thought that if he placed his hand there, Mao Nanbei might get angry. But Mao Nanbei from the corner of her eye saw this, and she proactively pressed her little head against Luke Sun's big hand, rubbing it while saying thank you. Luke Sun started to rub Mao Nanbei's little head, saying you're welcome, we're family. At the same time, he couldn't help but think so soft. Then Mao Nanbei expectantly handed the bowl to Luke Sun. "Can I have another one?" Meanwhile, on the small path of the Xiaoshuzai, the sect master and the peak masters seemed to be visiting Luxon. From their conversation, it was learned that they wanted Luxon to go to a forbidden area where all new disciples of the demon sect must undergo a trial. That place is the starting point for all new recruits of the demon sect. It is also the final resting place for all fallen souls. Soon they arrived at the mountaintop. Although they came to find Luke Sun, due to the Mid-Autumn Festival, they also came to send their greetings to the little uncles. Seeing this, Luke Sun urged them to sit down quickly. Then he sized up the sect leader and the others, wishing them a happy Mid-Autumn Festival. He didn't even bring a gift, but Luke Sun's smile remained warm and enthusiastic. Meanwhile, he was already scheming how to get something for free from these people. He would use the pudding in his hand. Several people looked at the pudding, puzzled. What is this thing? However, since Luke's son offered it for them to try, they all reached for it. Then it was placed into the mouth. The next moment, the eyes of the Egg Clan master widened. The beautiful Peak Master was rendered speechless by the sweetness. The other Peak Masters looked the same. They had lived for hundreds of years. They had never tasted such a marvelous thing. They then asked Luke's son for the recipe in perfect unison. They could offer spirit stones as payment. Luke's son's lips curled slightly upon seeing this. He took the bait, didn't he? Then in a harmless manner he said, "Of course I can give you the recipe. We are all people of the demon sect. Why make such a clear distinction?" At this point his tone changed. But everything depends on sincerity. If your sincerity is too little, I will give this formula away. You will lose face as well, won't you? In their suspicions, Luke's son's true intention was eventually revealed. That is, he would give the formula to the most sincere person. And later, they could sell this pudding themselves. As soon as these words were spoken, everyone was shocked, because they realized the huge profits involved. Once this thing is released, the Heavenly Dust Realm will definitely explode in popularity. By then, cultivation resources will be more than abundant. You can cultivate as many disciples as you want. Once you understand this, the fat sect leader beside them took the lead and bid 1,000 spirit stones. The law enforcement sect leader quickly followed with a bid of 1,500 spirit stones. But then came the dirty one. The elder sect leader bid 1,501 spirit stones. This left everyone speechless as they looked at him. At this moment, the beautiful sect leader directly offered 2,000 spirit stones. This sweet gesture women love the most. This made the egghead sect leader wonder if he had gone crazy. You should know, 2,000 spirit stones could already buy a magical item. As for Luke's son, he had a big smile on his face. The experience points from 2,000 spirit stones would probably be worth tens of thousands. As for these dessert recipes, he remembered a great many of them. Seeing that no one was bidding higher, Luke's son was about to announce the end when the usually stingy Lu Dan sect master, who would never spend a single spirit stone, suddenly saw from afar Jila swallowing her saliva at the pudding. The Lu Dan sect master was silent for a while. After making a difficult decision in his heart, he offered 3,000 spirit stones. These words shocked all the peak masters. Has a stingy sect leader gone mad today? He usually won't spend any spirit stones even when he's sick. Today, he's actually willing to spend 3,000. What they didn't know was that the stingy sect leader had already prepared to eat 2 meals a day. But to have Jili take her as a master, it's all worth it. Seeing this, Luke's son directly announced the deal. This is a place where everyone can obtain a treasure weapon. Luke's son, who has trained himself to be a natural sword embryo without needing a sword, will receive what kind of top-tier weapon. Previously, Luke's son Mbaipia successfully used the pudding recipe in the braised egg sect master. He changed 3,000 spirit stones. The peak masters, of course, were reluctant to miss out on the food recipe. They wanted the egg master to share it with them. To do so, they would split the cost. Each person would give the egg master 500 spirit stones. The egg master was very tempted. This way he wouldn't lose out much. But he glanced at Jili. He immediately abandoned the idea. What if they make the pudding first and use it to deceive Jili? Then wouldn't he lose his beloved disciple? So facing their investment, the egg master decisively and firmly rejected it. This left the other peak masters puzzled. When did the stingy sect master become so generous? It was only before leaving that the egg master remembered an important matter. I mentioned a place to Luke's son. It's a forbidden area in the demon sect, second only to the back mountain. It's called Zangshan. It's where the spirits of the demon sect's heroes rest. It's also where countless demon sect disciples gain recognition from magical artifacts. As for the famous Zangshan, Luke's son has no reason not to know it, but he can't go there today. He's free any other time. Today he's having dinner with the beautiful ladies to properly celebrate this annual mid-autumn festival. Soon after, Luke's son prepared a large meal. Jili and Maobei, 2 foodies, immediately started grabbing food. Halfway through the meal, Mao Nambe asked Luke's son, "Are you ready to enter Zhang Mountain? It's a place that cannot be returned from." In the puzzled daylight of Luke's son, Mao Nambe explained it to Luke's son again. It turns out that the treasures of Zhang Mountain contain the spiritual remains of cultivators after death, and when disciples of the demon sect enter Zhang Mountain, they see you through the eyes of future generations, so it won't harm you. But if you refuse their magical artifacts recognition, and then go back to pick it up afterwards, they'll feel insulted. Luke's son understood immediately after hearing this. Simply put, you can't go back on your decision. Otherwise, they'll attack immediately. Second senior sister added a sentence. So think carefully about what weapon you want. Luke's son nodded, indicating he had already decided. Mao Nambe seemed to have guessed Luke's son's thoughts. He asked if Luke's son had his eyes on Zangshan's top-tier magic sword. Mao Nambe immediately dissuaded Luke's son from that idea. His inner sword wouldn't allow him to touch it, would it? Luke's son, upon hearing this, only gave an ambiguous reply. Act according to the situation. But as soon as foodie Jili heard chicken, she immediately misunderstood. She grabbed a big chicken leg. This heard Luke's son couldn't bear to look at the cute, clueless Jili. At this moment, his attention was completely on his second senior sister's hand. He saw her hand him a piece of stone. It turned out to be something the system couldn't display. Senior sister said this is a gift from the senior brother to the junior brothers and sisters. A total of 5 pieces were given. Now only 1 piece remained. Luxun then asked what this was for. Second senior sister replied, "You'll know once you go." The next day, the time arrived at the foot of Kang Mountain. The master of the Ludan sect brought Luxun here. From here on, Luxun will have to walk his own path. At this moment, Luxun noticed something at the foot of the mountain. There was a small wooden house. The door of the small wooden house slowly opened. An old man slowly walked out. He was the guardian of this mountain. He was also the person who had followed the master the longest. Luxun sighed inwardly. What a refined and wise elder. He can't be said to have absolutely no connection with the demon sect, but he's definitely out of place. Lu Dan then bowed to the old man and said, "I greet you, senior. This is Teacher's Nameser's newly accepted disciple, Luxun." Luxun followed suit and bowed. The old man of the mountain froze for a moment when he saw Luxun. This left Luxun puzzled. Why did his expression look as if he had known him for a long time? Before Lu Tao could figure it out, a system notification suddenly appeared before him. You have gained Lucky Buff 1. Luxun was greatly shocked. He had played his main character for so long in his past life. This is the first time encountering a situation where luck value is increased. You should know that in the entire Tianxuan Realm, everyone's luck value is locked at 1. This made Luxun wonder. What kind of special existence is the old man in front of him? How can he increase someone's luck value? Could it be that this old man is the legendary Lucky Koi? With this thought, Luxun's mind started to wander again. He couldn't help but think about the strange event that would occur when the cat and the old man met. The peculiar incident that would happen when the cat and the old man crossed paths. As he thought about it, Luxun continued walking into the mountain. While lost in thought, he walked into Kang Mountain. The owner of the Ludan sect grinned as he watched. His task was complete. Then he soared into the sky. He flew straight back to his little hut. I placed a bet with several peak masters, betting on what rank of weapon Luxun will bring out. On the other hand, Luxun is walking very slowly on the official mountain path. This is his first time to Zangshan, so he finds it quite novel. There were some posts related to it on the previous life's forum. Zangshan is both a treasure trove and a graveyard. All magic weapons are arranged according to their rank. The higher you go, the higher the rank of the magic weapon. And at the top of the mountain is a famous sword left by the senior brother. The sword's aura is near. When Luxun reaches a certain step, all the magic swords present begin to tremble violently. All the sword-type magical tools are trying to catch Luxun's attention. They all want to be taken by Luxun. And in the next moment, Luxun's sword heart trembled. Luxun pretended to appear indifferent. It's not that you all look bad. It's just that he has the intention but lacks the power. This is a place where anyone can obtain a magical weapon. Luxun, who has trained himself into a natural sword embryo but has no sword to hold, can he gain the recognition of this purple-grade immortal artifact before him? With a pile of magic swords to choose from, it's hard not to be tempted. But Luxun could only pretend to be unconcerned. Because his heart sword is overflowing with jealousy right now, it absolutely forbids Luxun from touching a single sword. Its possessiveness towards Luxun is extremely strong. So in its eyes, these magic swords are like the flashy goods outside. So Luxun didn't stay. He continued to ascend. At this point, Luxun felt something was different. It seemed like he was about to reach the area of celestial-grade magic treasures. Magic treasures of this level are considered the treasured possessions of any other sect. The sect leader of the Ludan sect, and the others as well. They have been keeping a close eye on Luxun's every move. Previously they had seen all the magic swords and spirit swords move for Luxun. Now they saw Luxun entering the immortal level area, and they started to get uneasy. It's important to note that these immortal level magic treasures all came from their late senior brothers, junior brothers, and senior sisters. Luxun's eldest senior brother had originally taken in 12 disciples. To this day, those who have fallen are only the Ludan sect master and a few others left. Meanwhile, Luxun on Zhang Mountain suddenly froze. A piece of clothing caught his eye. It was called First Meeting. Luxun couldn't help but wonder how it appeared here. After all, this was his favorite piece of equipment in his past life. Back then, with its help, that was the kind of person who could cut down anyone he wanted. It was definitely a powerful tool for showing off and flirting at the same time. And now it should be reacting to me as well. Furious Luxun cursed at it, then snorted and turned to walk away. It would have been better if we hadn't met. But Luxun couldn't help but glance at Chu Jian again. In his past life, Chu Jian was someone he discovered in a secret realm. In other words, a disciple of the demon sect received its recognition, and then died in the secret realm. If conditions permit, it would be better to have that person avoid that secret realm. At this moment, the mist grew thicker. 5 purple items appeared in front of Lu. Short sword, and a waist, a ring, and this left the road a bit confused. It's rare to see a dice in the heavenly dust realm. At the same time, the fatty peak master watching from outside had a complex expression after seeing this. His eyes were somewhat complicated. He could even hear junior sister's voice in his ears. calling out one after another senior brother 11. He remembered it clearly. That day, junior sister suddenly came to him with a dice and told him, as long as my role is higher than hers, she will marry me. This is unbelievable. The young and handsome him. At that time he excitedly asked, is that true? Junior sister held up the dice and said, with master and senior brothers as witnesses, the heavens bear witness. Then under the witness of many senior brothers and sisters, he threw a 2. While junior sister casually tossed, just as he didn't know what to do, his junior sister circulated her spiritual energy in front of everyone and flipped it to 1. He would never forget what his junior sister said to him that night. 11th senior brother, if you can't throw a 1, then I'll make it happen against all odds. That day it rained heavily on the mountain, but in his heart, he always remembers that sunny day. And that very night, under the witness of their fellow disciples, they got married. Meanwhile on Mount King, Luxun scanned the purple-clad people present. It seemed like they were ignoring him. Only that they let out a sharp piercing sound of a sword cry. This short sword, whether in appearance or quality, seems flawless. He also vaguely felt that this short sword was the best among the 5 purple tier items. What Luxun didn't know was, this sword actually came from the senior sister of the sect master and the others. At this moment, the sect master and the others were extremely excited. If Luxun brought it out, he could definitely restore the glory of the senior sister. At this moment, it would be a lie for Luxun to say he wasn't tempted. It's just that he doesn't know if the little sword in his sword heart would allow it. But Luxun doesn't care anymore. He'll treat a dead horse as a live one. Maybe he can succeed. While others practice the sword, he practices the heart. He directly forged a sword in his heart. He transformed himself into a natural sword embryo. But as a result, he couldn't grip a sword with his hands, because his natural sword embryo is possessive. It won't allow him to touch other swords. But when facing the top divine sword of the demonic sect, will the natural sword embryo recognize this divine sword? Before this, Luxun had already been trying to grasp the magic sect's divine sword, the strongest immortal sword, the windstorm. Just as Luxun was about to touch it, a wave of energy suddenly rippled across the sword. Then Luxun felt as if he were standing in the middle of an icy, snowy world. Snow was falling heavily from the sky. Luxun never expected it to be the legendary sword key illusion, truly worthy of being a purple-grade immortal artifact. It's hard to imagine what kind of extraordinary talent its owner possessed. How dazzling they must have been. Unknown to this short sword belonged to the senior sister of the sect master and others, the first disciple his senior brother took in while traveling the world. If she were still alive, the position of the demon sect's leader basically wouldn't fall to Leader Lu Dan, and Leader Lu Dan's senior sister was incredibly brilliant back then. She killed the evil dragon that was stirring up trouble and harming the people. You should know that Tianxuan sect, one of the 4 great sects back then, in order to slay the evil dragon, ended up losing all their inner disciples. That elder was also seriously injured, and the senior sister once used this sword to slay a ferocious Jiao dragon in the raging waves. That's how Calming the Waves got its name. The Ludan sect master looked at the calming waves in front of Luxun. He so hoped Luxun could bring it out, to recreate the glory of his senior sister. In the illusion, Luxun walked step by step towards the calming waves. For some reason the snowstorm in the illusion now is obstructing his progress. It had just been so lively and responsive to him earlier, this fickle little thing. He still believed that he could hold it today. Moments later Luxun successfully grasped the calm wind wave, but the small sword in his sword heart immediately started to tremble. Then with a bang, Luxun was sent flying again. It was just like that day in the bamboo forest, when he tried to touch his second senior sister's wooden sword. Again Luxun landed face first. He gestured to the small sword in his heart. He desperately wanted to yell, but didn't want him to take it. Say it sooner. This scene also left the Lu Dan sect leader and the others dumbfounded. What's going on? Their senior sister's sword clearly targeted the junior uncle. But why was he flung away in the end? They never imagined it was because Luxun's innate sword embryo was jealous. On the other side, Luxun buried his handsome face. He pulled it out from the field. Forget it. If I can't get it, I can't get it. Today, there will be the weapon that belongs to him. After adjusting his emotions, he set his sights on the sword Kai near the mountain top. The sword Kai near the mountain top is the treasure that guards the mountain. It is the magical sword of the sect's ancestor. Its blade is ornate. I can't tell what material it's forged from. When Luxun arrived, he sensed something was wrong, because whether it's Ding Feng Bo or any other sword, they all reacted to him. But this sword alone showed absolutely no reaction to him. What's strange? Shouldn't the sword be kept in its scabbard? Why is it separated now? Luxun seemed to be lost in thought. He took out the small black stone that second senior sister had given him. He felt that this object might be somewhat related to the sword. As Luxun brought the black stone closer to the sword's aura, the sword's aura indeed began to tremble. It seems that they are somewhat curious about Luxun. Seizing this opportunity, Luxun strides forward. He is now racing against time. He must seize it while the sword Kai is still hesitating. Just as Luxun reaches for the sword Kai, the small sword fork in his sword heart begins to move. This time it felt as if Luxun's whole body had been struck by a heavy hammer. He was blasted away. He was blasted from the mountaintop to the foot of the mountain, and his health bar began to plummet. Only a sliver of health remained. This had never happened before. In the past, even when he was knocked back, it wasn't this exaggerated, but Luxun had a delighted smile on his face. This time, he didn't come back empty-handed. Luxun was seen holding a sword scabbard close at hand. At the same time, Luxun's lucky buff shattered. Could it be the buff that the old senior gave him? That's what kept him alive. At this time, the old senior came before Luxun. Luxun was puzzled. The old senior smiled gently at him. Then the scabbard in Luxun's hand suddenly began to tremble. Immediately after, on the scabbard, there were 2 beads at the ends of the black strings. They began to intimately coil around the elder's wooden staff. This surprised Luke. The scabbard actually has a spirit, and it's so lively too. The elder pointed at the scabbard in Luxun's hand with his wooden staff, and then pointed himself. Since Luxun said, "You mean this scabbard originally belonged to you?" The old man slowly shook his head. "Then this scabbard was forged by you?" This time, he actually guessed right. The old man nodded with a hint of pride. This caused Luxun's eyes to light up. Turns out he's a master artifact refiner. The senior humbly waved his hand. Then he gently patted Luxun's shoulder. Luxun felt something in his heart. It was as if the senior had entrusted it to him. At this moment, Sec Master Lu Dan and several peak masters quickly arrived here. They came to congratulate Luxun for obtaining the top-tier magic weapon. Luxun was truly moved. "But can we at least get him up first? This man is a bit peculiar. Clearly he has cultivated a natural sword embryo. Yet because of jealousy, the sword embryo doesn't allow him to touch other swords. This caused him to miss a top-tier divine sword. But he still obtained the divine sword's scabbard. Fortunately, the scabbard's grade is a purple-level celestial artifact. In his previous life, Luxun only used a blue-grade weapon. By that time, he was already level 60. He was able to unleash 100% of the blue weapon's power. But now this sword sheath is of mid-tier purple grade. Even if he were level 60, he wouldn't be able to bring out its full power, let alone now when he's weaker. The most important thing is that the sword sheath also has 2 special skills. The first is Seal Sword. It's somewhat similar to his swordless domain. As for the second charge, Sword Draw, it involves inserting the sword into its sheath. The longer the charge, the greater the power. Suddenly Luxun furrowed his brows. Because he doesn't have a sword, what good is his skill? He's a sword now. Could it be that he's going to insert a person into the scabbard? At that moment, Luxun had a flash of inspiration. Since there's no sword, could sword energy work? After all, sword energy is considered part of the sword. If I say it, I'll do it. He brought his index and middle fingers together, trying to guide the sword energy into the scabbard. This method really helped Luxun succeed. Doesn't that mean that from now on, when others draw their swords, he'll draw his sword aura? Luxun had already figured out how to act cool in the future. Immediately, Luxun infused all of his sword energy into the sword sheath. But soon Luxun felt numb. Who could understand? He never expected there would be a day when the sword sheath would drain him dry. At this moment, lying in bed, Luxun was lost in thought. Because the player's arrival is only 6 days away, he needs to go down the mountain to prepare. After all, what if he could meet his sister? Even if he could only see her from afar, that would be good. She's also playing this game, but her online time is only 1 hour a day. She's not addicted to games at all. She only plays games to have something in common with me. An hour's time? Will I be able to meet her? Optimistic, Luxun couldn't help but feel a little sad. But after everything Luxun had gone through that day, he was already exhausted. He began to drift into a deep sleep. He found himself back in the familiar place. It was his second senior sister's sword intent training. While Luxun was stunned, his second senior sister's sword shadow lunged at him. Reacting quickly, Luxun narrowly dodged the sword, and Luxun, having awakened his sword Kai, began to think about how to counterattack. However, his sword ki was deflected by his second senior sister's sword shadow. But the length of the sword energy surprised him. He hadn't expected that in the dream. The sword energy would be so much longer than outside. It felt like it could wrap around his waist. But the next moment, Luxun no longer had time to be happy, because his second senior sister's sword shadow was already lunging at him with a long sword. The next day, Luxun woke up from his bed drenched in sweat. He had been whipped by the second senior sister all night, but with the support of the sword energy, he was able to survive a few more times. At this moment, someone knocked on Luxun's door. Luxun yawned and opened the door. It was the leader of the Lu Dan sect. It turns out today was the day Luxun was supposed to go down the mountain for training, and the ugly attendant disciple has already arranged the hall. The Lu Dan sect master specifically came to inform Luxun. Luxun responded that he understood. He then curiously asked who was following him. The Lu Dan sect master replied that it was inner sect disciple Murongyan. This made Luxun feel somewhat puzzled. Why didn't they choose Ji Li, who he was familiar with, under Lu Dan sect master's notice? It turns out that Ji Li had already gone down the mountain for training. Even the Grandmaster Lu Dan didn't know when she left. This made him very sad. He didn't know how long his favorite disciple had been gone. He only just received the news. This master's performance was quite a failure. Lu was also helpless. Since Jie had already left, there was nothing he could do. At this time the Lu Dan sect master took out a life bead and let Luke Sun recognize it with a drop of blood. Luke Sun did as instructed and asked what the bead was used for. He didn't seem to have seen this kind of item in his past life game. The Lu Dan sect master explained that it was a precious life artifact. As long as someone dies outside, it will change from bright red to black, to remind them. Ruth really wanted to say thank you, just to find out whether I'm dead or not, making such a big fuss over it. The egg master, seeing his goal was achieved, took his leave, and reminded Mirongyan to wait for him at the reception peak. Luke Sun, however, was a bit dissatisfied. He came all this way and didn't even get a protective artifact, but since the master didn't give it to him, then the senior sisters will give it to you, right? With this thought in mind, Luke Sun arrived at the small bamboo grove, and also took the opportunity to say goodbye to second senior sister and Mao Nambe. As soon as Mao Nambe heard this, he blurted out, "Does that mean there will be no one to cook tonight?" In the next moment, Mao Nambe was given a light tap on the head by second senior sister. As she sat on a stone, second senior sister gently reminded him, "Good, go home early." Hearing Luke Sun's response, second senior sister smiled in satisfaction. After chatting with the other two senior sisters for a few more moments, Luke Sun was about to take her leave. She had just taken 2 steps when she was called back by Mao Nambe. She shouted, "If you can fight outside, then fight. If you can't win, just run. Don't feel ashamed, got it? If it's too bad, just run back and tell me. I'll help you get back at them." Luke Sun waved his hand and gave a loud hum. It also brought a bit of warmth to Luke Sun's heart. But why doesn't she have any self-defense tools? This girl seems to be in serious danger. Is her entire life going to be ruined? Luke Sun, who was preparing to go down the mountain for training, arrived at Jian Peak. This once again caused the female disciples of the demon sect to cheer. When Luke Sun saw Mirongyan waiting at Jian Peak, he couldn't help but smile and say, "Mirongyan, have you lost weight?" Mirongyan laughed heartily. She really had lost weight. He lost weight from over 200 pounds to 200 pounds. Luke Sun nodded and said, "Congratulations." Then he said, "Let's go." "What kind of magical tool are we using?" Mirongyan took out her little life-flying sword. Seeing the puzzled look on Luke Sun's face, he and Mirongyan stepped onto the little life-flying sword and flew down the mountain. This made Luke Sun question, "Is this really okay?" Mirongyan confidently reassured. Just as Luke Sun reached the Jishan Peak, an unexpected situation occurred. It was the sword energy left behind by senior brother Luke Sun. It appeared halfway through. However, Mirongyan didn't see anything at all. Just as Luke Sun wondered about the sword energy halfway, why did this happen? He suddenly saw that the sword energy in mid-air split into a small sword energy. Then this small sword energy shot towards Luke Sun. Luke's face changed dramatically. The sword energy entered Luke Sun's storage ring. To be precise, it entered the sword sheath inside Luke Sun's storage ring. Luke Sun let out a sigh of relief. I thought the sword energy was going to strike him. Then a system prompt sounded. The message displayed was 1% of Yanla's sword energy, and Yanli is senior brother Luke Sun's name. Although it was only 1%, Luke Sun could feel its power. This also made Luke Sun understand why his senior sister didn't give him a protective artifact. They must have known that this sword energy would follow them. At this moment, Mirongyan asked if Luke Sun had already left the demon sect's territory. Where should we go next? Luke Sun pondered for a moment upon hearing this, thinking about Jia Li. That troublesome younger sister is probably going down the mountain for revenge. Although she has both great strength and spiritual power, what if someone tricks her? What if it escalates to that point? Her whole life will be ruined. Thinking of this, Luke Sun became anxious. He immediately shouted to Mirongyan to go to Jila's hometown. Mirongyan immediately turned the car around, heading toward Jila's hometown, Yong'an County. Shortly after, in an inn not far from Yong'an County, a one-eyed man and the innkeeper seemed to be plotting something. But Luke Sun walked in at that moment, shouting out for a meal. The one-eyed man instructed the innkeeper to attend to Luke Sun and the others. He then approached Luke Sun and asked what they would like to eat. Luke Sun furrowed his brows as he watched the innkeeper approach. When the innkeeper asked again what they wanted to eat, Luke Sun waved his hand, indicating they could serve anything. After the innkeeper left, Mirongyan asked Luke Sun what was wrong. Luke Sun whispered to Mirongyan, telling her not to drink the tea. "It's poisoned. This place is a den of iniquity." Mirongyan's expression changed in surprise. She poured the tea onto the ground. The tea on the ground instantly reacted, emitting black smoke. This made Mirongyan very curious. How did Luke Sun know this place was a den of iniquity? Luke Sun said that as soon as he stepped into the room, he immediately noticed a strange smell in the shop. Mirongyan sniffed and said it really seemed to be there. Luke Sun was speechless. He's just talking nonsense. It's probably psychological suggestion making you think there's a smell. The real reason is that the innkeeper's name is surprisingly a red name. You should know that in Tianxuan Realm setting, only those who have killed will become red named. This guy is no good. Then the system side quest prompt sounded. The mission is to save a defenseless mother and daughter. The reward is 50,000 experience points and 100 reputation points. Luxun looked very excited. This is the first time a side quest has appeared, and it's a 3-part mission. Then Luxun began to survey the surroundings of the inn. Although the first stage of the mission indicated that the mother and daughter were unarmed, it seems they must have already been tied up by now. Mirongyan was still absorbed in what Luxun had just said. She looked at Luxun and asked, "Is he searching for the source of the scent?" Upon hearing this, Luxun was amused by Mirongyan's innocent expression. He shook his head and said no. "I'm looking for the person they kidnapped." Mirongyan was startled again. "They actually kidnapped someone?" Luxun pointed toward the kitchen and raised an eyebrow. "Maybe they're in the kitchen, tied up. Perhaps they're sharpening knives right now, getting ready to butcher them for stew." Mirongyan immediately visualized it in her mind. She instantly felt disgusted. Luxun Li stopped talking. Mirongyan, who had a strong sense of justice, couldn't tolerate it any longer. She wouldn't allow such a thing to happen. She was going to the kitchen to investigate. Luxun immediately held Mirongyan back and told her to wait. "For a black market like this, we'll definitely need to use some methods. It's not a good idea to rush in directly." Mirongyan obediently sat down. Then she asked what should be done. Luxun responded, saying to just watch him. Then Luxun called out to the innkeeper. The innkeeper approached and spoke. "Sir, what can I do for you?" Luxun waved his hand and directly ordered, "Tell your boss to release the mother and daughter he captured. Then have him bind himself and bring him to my table." Good heavens, not only is Mirongyan stunned, even the waiter is dumbfounded. "Big brother, is this your way of saving people?" Having recovered, the waiter asked Luxun if he was joking. But judging from his expression and the people behind him approaching with weapons, it doesn't look like he's joking at all. With the sword energy cultivated by his innate sword embryo, once it's drawn this time, he'll activate massacre mode. Faced with Luxun's direct table flipping showdown, the shop assistants of this shady establishment also surrounded Luxun and his companions. Mirongyan was about to make a move, but Luxun stopped her. It was simply because he hadn't fought monsters in a long time and wanted to test his skills. Saying this, Luxun directly lunged towards the shop assistants. Chaotic battle ensued. Of course, the shop assistants could only take the beating. After Luxun had his fill of fighting monsters, he patted the dust off his palms. He asked them where the mother and daughter were locked up. A waiter, beaten into a swollen mess, pointed in a direction and said, "In the kitchen." But suddenly, the waiter let out a blood-curdling scream. Turned out he'd been shot in the head with an arrow. The one who did it was the innkeeper. He went to call for help when Luxun flipped the table. Mirongyan looked at the group of people outside. She asked if Luxun wanted her to take action this time. Luxun glanced outside where everyone had red names. He refused Mirongyan's offer to intervene. At the same time, Luxun's cold voice rang out. They no longer deserve to live. At that moment, a mountain bandit charged toward Luxun. Luxun instantly activated his swordless domain. He sent all the attacking bandits flying. The bandits' faces were instantly filled with terror. "He's actually a cultivator." Lux's eyes narrowed. He coldly uttered, "Draw." In an instant, a sword scabbard appeared in his hand. The moment the scabbard appeared, sword energy surged outwards. The shopkeeper had planned to secretly shoot Luxun with an arrow, but now he's been interrupted by the unrestrained sword energy. Luxun looked at him and chuckled, saying, "Tell me the whereabouts of the mother and daughter, and I'll let you live." Hearing this, the shopkeeper immediately fled, but that was just a feint. He picked up his crossbow. After aiming at Luke, he immediately shot at him. Faced with the incoming arrow, Luxun simply smiled. Then with a casual wave, he sent out a burst of kwai. He knocked the arrow down. The shopkeeper, glancing at Luxun, saw him already chasing after him. He reached to his waist and drew a soft sword. The moment Luxun landed behind him, he directly lunged at Luxun, but in Luxun's swordless domain, he couldn't even touch Luxun in the slightest. Luxun's heart sword wouldn't even allow top-tier divine swords to come close to him, let alone a mere ordinary iron sword. Just as Luxun was about to take action, the shopkeeper, seeing Luxun's extraordinary abilities, immediately knelt and begged for mercy, shouting that he was forced into it. The county magistrate of Yong'an was oppressing the people too much, which made life unbearable for them. That's why he resorted to such drastic measures. Luxun looked at him in confusion. According to the innkeeper's explanation, Yong'an County had once been peaceful and prosperous, but 3 years ago, a new county magistrate was assigned to Yong'an. This magistrate engaged in massive construction projects, enslaved the people, and exploited the locals. It caused the farmland to fall into disuse. Husbands and wives couldn't be together. Mothers and sons couldn't meet. It even drove many people to their deaths. Everyone was forced into a corner. Only then did they gather and become bandits. As he spoke, the innkeeper began to cry bitterly. Mirongyan listened and said, "Nowadays the world is peaceful, but most cultivators aren't good people. Many disciples of the demonic sect were forced onto the mountain like this." Luxun didn't say anything in response. Instead, he asked the shopkeeper why he kidnapped an innocent mother and daughter. The shopkeeper immediately scrambled to his feet, saying he would take him to see the mother and daughter. He'd explain everything immediately. Meanwhile, a beautiful woman was comforting her child. She is clearly being kidnapped. It seems that it's hard to tell how terrified she is. The shopkeeper also pointed at the woman and said, "Look, that woman isn't afraid of us at all. She clearly has the face of someone who has oppressed us for years, and they are the county magistrate's family." At the same time, a system prompt sounded in Luke Sun's ears. His first-tier task has been completed. The second task followed closely after the first one. The task is to clear the fog and uncover the truth. The reward for the task is 60,000 experience and 100 reputation. When Luke Sun saw the second task, he immediately realized that the shopkeeper was likely lying. So he asked the shopkeeper to open the door. He wanted to go in and ask himself. The shopkeeper was unlocking the door while making gestures with the key. He quickly thought about how to stall for time, wait for their boss to return. Because once they meet, it's very likely he will be exposed. Seeing him dragging his feet, Luke Sun directly used force to push the door open. He told the shopkeeper to hurry and come with him. The beautiful woman saw Luke Sun and the others leave. She couldn't help but hold her child tightly. At the same time, she shouted loudly, "You really have a lot of nerve. I've given you all the gold and silver. What more do you want?" The shopkeeper, upon hearing this, was immediately terrified. He quickly said something to shut the woman's mouth. He didn't let her continue speaking. But when the woman saw Luke Sun's face, her expression changed. He looks so good looking, yet he's a thief? What a way. The shopkeeper has already thought about pulling Luke Sun away, because continuing this conversation will really expose things. Luke Sun directly bypassed the shopkeeper and walked to the beautiful woman. He said to her, "I will ask just one question. If you answer correctly, I'll escort you out." The beautiful woman excitedly asked, "Really? Will you really let her child go?" Luke Sun nodded and asked his question. "That is, what are the 5 grains in a bumper harvest?" The beautiful woman said without thinking. "The 5 grains are rice, glutinous millet, foxtail millet, wheat, and barley." Luke Sun stood up immediately upon hearing this, saying, "Good." Then he instructed Mirong Yan, "Grab the fat shopkeeper. This young woman isn't someone who lives a life of luxury. She understands the hardships of life and certainly cares about the lives of the people." The shopkeeper didn't dare stay any longer and immediately ran outside, shouting, "Brother, help!" His older brother, that is, the one-eyed man, finally returned. He looked at Luke Sun and hissed, "This appearance. I must spoil you tonight." Seeing this, Mirong Yan asked Luke Sun if he still wanted to arrest her. Luke Sun said no, to just close the door. The most important thing now is to quickly start the third ring task. Luke Sun then came before the beautiful woman and told her not to be afraid. He said softly that he was here to save her. Please tell him what the truth is. The beautiful woman can only choose to trust Luke Sun now. Under her explanation, it turns out that the beautiful woman is indeed the wife of the county magistrate of Yong'an County. The child in her arms is also her daughter. She had recently heard of a village suffering from a flood. The county magistrate of Yong'an being too busy to attend to everything, so the beautiful woman wanted to help lighten his load. She brought money and supplies to assist with disaster relief. But halfway they were robbed by a band of bandits. She ended up imprisoned. Later the beautiful woman learned that they wanted to capture her, to exchange her for her husband in return for a girl named Jai Li. Poor girl. Know her story. Now she's still being targeted by bandits. I don't expect my husband to really bring that girl to exchange for my son and me. I only hope that this group of bandits can be eradicated and harm to the people can be removed. That way my baby and I will have died for a cause." Her expression was so resolute. Mirong Yan didn't expect this to be related to Ji Li, but Luke Sun reassured the lady. With him here, no one would be in danger. The lady, however, shook her head. She didn't know that Luke Sun was a cultivator, and those bandits were incredibly cruel. She only hoped that Luke Sun would run and not worry about her. If possible, take her daughter back to her father. It was at this moment that Luke Sun's second mission was completed. Immediately after the third mission began, the task was to escort the mother and daughter safely home. The task rewards are 70,000 experience points and 100 reputation. There are also random wisdom attribute points. Luke Sun glanced at the beautiful woman and said, "He will be back soon." At this moment the beautiful woman also reacted. His confidence likely meant he was a cultivator. She then asked Mirong Yan which righteous sect disciple he was from. Mirong Yan replied that they were from the demon sect. The beautiful woman was instantly awkward after hearing this. What the heck? Are you sure this isn't a joke? On the other side, the mountain bandits had already set up their bows and arrows, waiting for Lu Sun to come out. Even if Lu is an immortal cultivator, he still can't take away that mother and daughter. Seeing this, Luke sighed and said, "Capture that mother and daughter. Isn't it all for the ancestral sword in the hands of that girl Surnam Jai? The ancestral sword that girl Surnam Ji possesses, I can give you a treasure, so you don't have to go through all this trouble." The bandit leader said that as long as Luke Sun produced it, he would let Luke Sun go. Luke Sun then took out his sword scabbard and let the bandit leader take it himself. The bandit leader, having heard, started walking towards Luxon, and just as the bandit leader reached Luxon, he immediately raised his sword and slashed at Luxon. The next moment, the swordless realm unfolded. The bandit leader was instantly sent flying. Luxon smiled. Since you want to become experience points, I'll grant your wish. The bandit leader immediately ran back. He ordered his underlings to shoot arrows immediately. The underlings quickly drew their bows and knocked their arrows. Countless arrows shot toward Luke Sun in a torrential rain. Luke Sun swung his shift. A flash of sword light instantly intercepted the arrows. Then Luke Sun's eyes narrowed as he coldly uttered, "Unshith." In that instant, countless sword Kai rampaged. The entire sky was dyed blood red. Countless screams echoed endlessly. With a celestial-grade sword sheath and a naturally born sword embryo. How invincible is he? Whether it's the brutal mountain bandits, or the savage magical beasts, he slaughtered them all indiscriminately. Not only that, he is gentle with others, and has maxed out looks as well. Even a young married woman would blush when she saw him. She would shy away with a flushed face. Suppressing the thoughts deep inside her heart, Luke Sun, in order to complete the third task, now had to safely escort the young woman home. Soon Luke Sun and the others arrived near Yongan County. At this moment he was surveying his surroundings, because he remembered the area around Yongan County. A fierce and ugly monster with max experience points. Speak of the devil, and the devil appears. A surge of dense demonic energy instantly swept over Luke Sun and the others. Then a blood-red-eyed demon beast, a gorilla, sprang out.